I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Hello, friends, and welcome back to the show. Oh man, we've got a good one in store for you guys. I'm really excited about this one. Real quick, if you like the show, follow the show, please. Subscribe wherever you listen. Just subscribe. That's all I ask. Also, give my guest here a follow on Instagram. Joining me, he is the curator of Giants of Ancient America. He's bringing forgotten history back to life. He's Travis Roy. Travis, welcome back to the show, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you back. It's been, I don't know, like a year or so, but maybe a little bit longer. But man, that was fun last time. It was like a turning point for my show. There was a couple episodes there, like a little batch there, and you were part of that batch where I felt like I think I know where I'm going to take this thing. So it was having you on was like a big moment for me. But before I get carried away, tell everybody about yourself because there's a lot of new people here.
Okay. Well, about me, what basically, in short, what I do is I go research old newspaper databases, and I try to find any reports on ancient giants that were reported. So this is where people were digging up ancient burial mounds as they were moving westward from the East Coast. You know, as we expanded, our country was expanding. They would come across mounds. They would sometimes dig into them, and so that's what I do. I look into the old newspapers and just search for giants, and you find them in cave burials, mound burials, and then I bring that back to the forefront. So these may be like from the late 1800s to early to mid 1900s, and I just crop them out, and because they may be like on the fourth or fifth page of some old newspaper that may not even be in existence today, and I bring them back up to the front and just post them so people can see it, and we are telling a story of these ancient people.
Oh yeah. It's valuable, or should I say invaluable? Like it's a great site. I'm happy to see that you're doing that. It's a good reminder of the way things used to be in a world that's largely forgotten that. And I know I floated this idea to you in a message just to give people kind of an overview of what we're trying to do here. It's going to be today's show is going to be like under the umbrella of giants and ancient America, but let's see if we can cover some of the possible ancient cities of the giants in America, some of the settlements that they may have established on that migration that you're talking about. And of course, we'll talk all about this, the overwhelming evidence really of these giants being a thing existing. I think that'd be a cool place to start. And also, you know, underground caverns, caves, catacombs, treasure associated with the giants, and of course, anything Nephilim related. That's what I'm thinking today. What do you think?
Sounds good. Sounds great to me. I'm ready for it.
Yeah, me too, man.
I have some stuff.
Yeah, I know. You told me you have a big pile of stuff over there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you want to let's start with the settlements and
Okay.
cities, and because this is stuff that's not in the history books. A lot of people think that this was just empty land, just trees, just green valley. I think I told you this story last time you were on about how I when I first moved into Tennessee, in central Tennessee, I had searched up the region I was living in to see what the history was, and they said it was just an empty valley. That Nashville was just an empty valley. And that's totally not the case at all. Speaking of ancient settlements, this was one of them. There have been people living here for thousands of years.
Oh yeah.
And so I that's why I really want to start with the settlements part, because I think this gets overlooked, doesn't get talked about much. You look like you're cooking over there. What you got?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that. I'll just briefly, before I get into a settlement, I'm just going to mention an old fort that
Mm.
so there was or is, I don't know, in Franklin County, Tennessee, an old fortification. And that was discovered. So Squire and Davis were working under the Smithsonian in the 1840s, and they just went out and were investigating and documenting, surveying old forts, which would be kind of like a city, a fortification. Um, so yeah, there you go. There you go. So
Is this
yeah,
the one?
that's the one I'm talking. Yeah, I've got that right here in my hand.
Love
So
it.
yeah, walls 16 foot thick and at the base and about 5 feet thick at the top by 10 feet in height. So there was a couple stone buildings you can see towards the top. They're kind of square. And then there's a couple of small spots above that are round. And they thought those were watchtowers. They weren't sure, but they were just like, they obviously had been fallen down.
Yeah.
So I was kind of a shock to see that they were there. So when you mentioned that, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you
We'll
brought it up
start
'cause
there.
I wanted to talk about it. And look at that. It says that that area in the middle there is 32 acres.
Hmm.
That's large.
Yeah.
This looks like it would be like a small little, those look like sheds in somebody's backyard.
Yeah.
But until you take into account the 32 acres.
Right.
This reminds me of a walled city
Hmm.
from Bible times, from the Middle East.
Yeah.
Just they would put these up on the hill and have, I just had a guy on, Chad Skumke, and he was showing me where he found a shape a lot like this up in Michigan, up in right next to Isle Royale, where I believe they were mining all this copper, and it looked a lot like this. I just think that this was a thing. They were putting up these walled cities. This may not have had the city in there. This may have been for fortification or something, but still, I think
Hmm.
they were putting these up. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No, no, I agree. Yeah, there seemed to be a lot around there. There were some in Ohio as well. Um,
Mhm.
I even found one that was in Kentucky. Um, and there was one in
Oh.
Kentucky, and I don't have that one. I do have it right here.
Oh, cool.
In this book. It's called Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley by Squire and Davis. This one here, these are kind of hard. I may post this one later. Near Lexington, Kentucky. This area, it looks to be about 15 and 3/4 acres, but it's near a river, but it has some ancient embankments and stuff like that and walls.
Mhm.
But I came across a,
I have one from Kentucky too.
oh,
Whenever
you
you're
do?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on my phone because I thought about pulling it up here, but it's
Yeah.
blurry, so I'm just gonna
Okay.
read it from my phone, but
Sure.
it's an article, and it's the name of the article was "A Kentucky Prehistoric City." And it says Mr. Greenbots, the owner of a farm at Peeled Oak on Slate Creek, a noted section of Bath County, in plowing up about 60 acres of level land this spring, discovered the ruins of a city of regular streets curved with stone and showing a higher order of architectural knowledge and greater civilization than any other prehistoric remains yet found in this county. Many years ago, a faint trace of a similar city was noticed in Montgomery County near Mount Sterling. But the owners of the land, having little taste for backyard researches, yeah, almost or entirely obliterated the evidence to make room for corn growing. And this is something that I have seen time and time again in a lot of these old articles. People are farming the land and they find these.
Hmm.
And it's a different time period. They don't really care about the historical value, or they just didn't see the historical value because I think
Right.
their livelihood was in the balance. It's like I need that fit for a field now
Right.
to
Yeah.
feed my family. So I think that's how a lot of these got lost, honestly. And I see that alluded to in a lot of these stories. But this is people were finding. I want people to know people were finding prehistoric cities over here in Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's a
Crazy.
giant that was found at an old fort in Kentucky. It could be very well the same thing or same area where, the fort or fortification I just talked about, or maybe the city.
Mhm.
This is from 1894 from the Mineral Point Tribune from Kentucky. This says the skeleton of a prehistoric giant has been exhumed at an old fort in Kentucky. It is 8 feet in stature and 4 feet across the shoulders. So there you go. It was just a
Yeah.
short report, and that's how some of these were.
Mhm.
It wasn't some elaborate story where like it's just like a little news bulletin, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But that tells you that some of these were pretty ancient places, and that the people that were doing it or the individuals doing it, a lot of times did have giants among them.
Oh, for sure. There's some stuff, some material that I've come across. I don't have it today to present because I'm kind of sitting on it. I was hoping to put it out in a book or something like that eventually, but it
Hmm.
has to do with giants and Kentucky, so I've got to mention it, right? It's Louisville,
Hmm.
another place, an ancient city. I'm telling you, if people probably think I'm nuts saying this. Mark my words, it's going to come out. If I have to prove it barehanded myself, I will. These cities, some of our American cities, were ancient cities. I assure you. And Louisville was one of them. And I have the stuff. I just need the time to put it all together and present it. But they were finding these burials of these priest kings
Oh
who
wow.
they were buried facing the sun, the setting sun, I think is
Hmm.
what it was.
Okay.
But they were also said to be men of big stature there
Yeah.
in Louisville. They were the
Wow.
guys that used to rule the place, was the
Yeah.
impression that people got by digging that up. Mass graves of these people, like, and those guys were not natives. They were said to be light skin, light hair in
Hmm.
Louisville.
Yeah.
Just like, whoa, what's really going on here?
Yeah. So what you're saying is like people just kept building cities upon this city before it.
Mhm,
Basically, some of our
mhm.
cities now in ancient times were, you know, very interesting places, um, with out people from the old world or maybe the Levant or, in the Holy Land eventually made it over here and
Mhm.
built their own cities in the US before the time of Columbus, pre-Columbus times,
Yeah.
Columbian times.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
I
you go.
think there yeah, that this came to mind, so I pulled it up. Yeah, so I think we have a number of things happening here where you have the article like the one I just read where these people found them on the farm and some of the people decided like we're just going to keep farming this land. We're going to destroy these ruins. So I think that happened, but also with some of the other cities, we just built right up on top of them. And this would be an example of that. This was from Istanbul. Of course, we know that's an old place.
Hmm.
It's funny if you look at Istanbul on a map or like the old uh, art depicting Istanbul, it looks just like Pittsburgh. It's on the same type of a little peninsula
Yeah.
between waterways. I think that these people were just building cities at the confluence of waterways. That's just what we've always done. And I think it's those cities at the confluence of waterways specifically that we built on top of because the location was just too good. It's very defensible. You look at a place like Pittsburgh from the air or even from the ground, it's got mountains on either side and there's a V there or a Y with the
Yeah.
rivers, and you can defend that easily. And we can get more into that later if it comes back up because I believe there were giants living there as well. There's evidence that suggests that those were the Allegheny giants that lived there in Pittsburgh. But yeah, to your point, I think for some of these cities, it was just like this is showing here. Got the Romans at the bottom, the Byzantine came in, the Ottoman on top of them, and then this more modern Republic era.
Hmm. And isn't that Cahokia? I believe
Mhm.
it's very close to St. Louis.
Yes.
It's on the other side or whatever, the river, I believe.
It
But
was
they
that whole
didn't
area.
build, yeah, they didn't build right on top of Cahokia, but they very well could have,
Mhm.
right? Because it's a waterway area, and you're right. That's a great point.
Mhm.
Um, and to
I
your point Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just gonna say, like, you're right. Like, they didn't build St. Louis right on top of Cahokia, but they built it on top of some sort of a Cahokia adjacent settlement. Because
Exactly.
where you see, if you go to St. Louis and you see there's a park there in front of the downtown area with the big archway, they leveled mounds to put that there.
Yeah.
Mounds and, ruins.
Hmm.
So
Probably
they were,
old housing areas and stuff from those
hmm
peoples were there as well. Or at least the remains of them. I mean, if they had done some excavating, you would find some artifacts and whatnot
hmm
right in that area.
Oh man, I'm loving that you brought up St. Louis. I mean, that place is loaded with this type of stuff. I'm sure it's come up in your research a lot, right? Like 'cause they were finding all kinds of weird stuff out there in St. Louis.
Hmm.
Mound City, isn't it what it used to be called? Mound.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, strangely enough, and there's a lot of places that have are named after mounds and stuff like cities,
hmm
Moundsville. But to your point, here's an interesting one, and I don't know if this was a city, but it was in Virginia, and you mentioned like how farmers would just plow over and like they would find things. This is one that I like a lot, and it's from Virginia, and it's from 1859. Okay, so a farmer on the Montague River in Virginia, in plowing his fields this spring, putting his plow deeper into the earth than usual, struck at some large flat stones lying horizontally. Upon removing them, he discovered a vault containing skeletons of enormous size, some singular pottery, and shells ornaments of curious workmanship supposed to have been worn in the ear beneath it. Anatomists, on measuring one of the thigh bones, pronounced the skeleton to have belonged to a human being who must have been at least 8 feet high. The field contains several hundred graves and is supposed to have been an extensive aboriginal cemetery. In many of the graves were found various articles of ornaments of exquisite workmanship, denoting the greater skill than usually found. So that was so there was an ancient settlement there. It was discovered by a farmer, you know,
hmm
and it was a megalithic type grave. Obviously, like he hit the big, flat capstone of this vault.
Right.
And he's like, okay, wait, there's a lot of these around here. We probably should look into all of them. So
They were
I know I
finding
find that
those.
fascinating.
Oh, me too. They were finding those big stone megalithic type graves in Nashville too. I was reading some stuff about Nashville, and those were all over the place out here, and they were over nearby the Star Fort
Okay.
in Nashville. It's called Fort Negley. It's a Star Forts. And I'm sure you're aware of the enigmatic nature of those. But while you were reading that, and that was a really good account, I found this quote I wanted to show you because I think that this kind of sums it all up. Right. This is from Chief Rolling Thunder in 1857. He said, "Innumerable moons ago, a race of white men, 10 feet high and far more rich and powerful than any white people now living, here inhabited a large range of country extending from the rising to the setting sun. Their fortifications crowned the summits of the mountains, protecting their populous cities situated in the intervening valleys. They excelled every other nation that flourished either before or since." And so that's Chief Rolling Thunder dropping bombs there. And he would
Yeah.
go on to say that the Great Spirit punished these people. So these were like white giants, apparently. That's what he's saying here. The Great Spirit punished them and wiped them out. And he said it left only their mounds on the tablelands. So those he paints the perfect picture there. The fortifications were they built them up on the hills, up on the summits, and they had
Hmm.
the cities down below. That's what I think about when I see that fortification that you showed me.
Hmm.
Something in that, just the way they used to build things. That's just what I see. And I just think that's it, right? I think whatever North America was called then, it was a preeminent land of the giants. That's what I think.
I think so. I mean, based off my research, they were all over. So he's right in what he says.
Yeah.
Like if all these articles are true and they can't all be wrong, right? And that's the painting of the picture he just spoke of, basically. He just
Mhm.
painted a picture with his words, and I could see it, like from the rising to the setting of the US. They were all over.
Yeah,
And
that
that's
speaks to your migration that you mentioned early on.
hmm
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And let's
God
see.
bless the Native Americans, man, for holding sacred these truths in story. That's how
Right.
I think all this. See. I've seen people on YouTube, and I don't, I'm not going to go saying names or slinging dirt at anybody, but I'll see people who will study the Giants thing for a couple days and think that they're going to really conquer this issue and really put it to rest. And you can't with this. There's too much to it. But I often hear people saying that, oh, well, some of this was man's need to make myth. Like we have some sort of a psychological need to make up these type of stories. And I personally, I don't agree with that. I don't think we have the need to make myths. I think we have the propensity to keep myths.
hmm
I think that's more in our nature, is to hold these myths sacred and pass them down, to keep traditions that are based in reality.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say something real crazy here, but
Go for it.
dragons,
hmm
dragons, unicorns, giants, all real in my book.
Yeah.
They're just, we've carried these myths down. We have a propensity to do that. I don't think we made up any of this stuff.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to the mythology,
Mm.
around the world. I really do.
Oh yeah.
Um, I mean, you like going to Norway, Scandinavia. They said the North was full of, giants and, different types of people, blue men, you know, hobbits or not, dwarves or whatever, you know.
Hmm.
And so I really think those things are true, like real. Like I know the giants are, but I think the other things are like, why wouldn't they be? Like, you know, I
Yeah.
agree with you on
Yeah.
that
We just
stuff.
have a modern human mindset. A lot of this, grow up in these schools, and churches don't really tend to teach about this either. And we have this
hmm
programming. I don't want to go too far down like that whole rabbit hole and get in the MK Ultra and all that stuff. But I do think there's a degree of programming here to
hmm
that, we're kind of taught to look and view these things as myth. But there's another quote here I want to read for you. This is a guy I came across in the 1920s in some of the papers from the 20s. His name was Hale Merritt. Um, Hale Merritt. They had they had some rock star names back then. This
Yeah.
guy this guy said, over the land that now constitutes Tennessee, long before white men set foot upon it, there dwelt a numerous people, unknown and unnamed. They builded their mounds and wrought their works in metal. History for them is an unwritten page. And that was Sunday, November 28th, 1920, in the Chattanooga Daily Times. And I think that I bring this up because I think it demonstrates a point. I think we see that people, even in the 20s, had a distant memory about this. But
hmm
I think it was the Chief Rolling Thunders and the Sarah Winnemucca's and other natives who had much more of a complete picture, because they, like I said, they keep the legends.
Yeah.
They had secret societies sworn to remember these legends word for word. They were all about, like, you want to memorize this word for word and pass it down in a pristine form to the younger generation. So the Cherokee had secret societies just for this, and
hmm
they would only, like, special people in the tribe would be allowed in.
hmm
It was always the young men who showed an interest.
You had to be worthy.
And
Yeah.
you had to be worthy. You had to be
Mhm.
a certain type of, you had to have a certain type of respect for this, and then they'd let you in. But if you would sit around, and in Myths of the Cherokee by James Mooney, he talks about this, how the young boys that were accepted into the society would be the ones staying late at the campfire, listening to the elders tell the stories. And eventually they would bring you in to a special campfire meeting that was inside of a longhouse, and you would stay there all night, and they would teach you. And then in the morning, when the sun was rising, you'd go out and stand in the creek, and a shaman would come out with a bone tooth comb and scratch you from like head to toe, scratch you, and then you'd be like initiated at sunrise into this secret society. Just I just bring that up. I mean, it's our modern Western mind thinks, oh, that's shamans and bone combs, like that's that's I'm saying that because that's how seriously they took this stuff.
They were protecting knowledge, and so they
Yeah.
had to be careful who they shared it with because that was going to be held until the next generation. So as that guy grew up, had children or whatever, he would be that passing the knowledge on to the next generation. It was up to him and men like him to decide who was worthy to hold the information. They didn't have libraries, so that's almost like their library of knowledge. And so the stories like this that they retained, I agree. This like I love that story about Chief Rolling Thunder that you just brought out.
Oh,
It's
and
a,
how well spoken he was.
yeah, yeah.
Incredible. These people are so intelligent.
They really were. Yeah, they were. And I don't
That's
know.
another thing, man. We don't have a complete picture of the history of them either. They've been
Yeah.
unfortunately they were painted as savages and barbarians, and we're told they didn't have languages. And I've had people on the show who have turned that on its head and said they actually did have languages. We're starting to re-uncover them or refine these
Oh,
languages.
yeah. That's crazy that people thought that they didn't have languages. I've
Or I should
always.
say written
Oh,
language.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you
Yeah.
mean. Yeah,
I meant that
yeah.
written. Yeah.
Written languages. Yeah, I'm sure that they had ways to do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you're right. There were a lot of people back then, as we moved westward, they tried to paint, everybody that was here, all the natives were just savages or whatever. And I feel like it gave them they felt better about taking over areas. I don't know. We don't want to get into all
Oh
that,
yeah. Oh yeah,
but
we don't have
I
to get
think
into
there's
that, but
something
I
to it for
yeah,
sure.
without getting into it, I think that's it.
Hmm.
I think you nailed it. That's how I look at it.
Hmm.
And I think our work is cut out for us trying to figure out what all was going on over here because this was a very complicated picture. There's a lot of
Yeah.
moving parts. There is this element of manifest destiny, right? And there is all these other elements too. And when it comes to the people themselves, it wasn't just natives over here. That was the big thing for me was finding out there were giants was big for me. It took me a while to digest that. But
Yeah.
then it was like, oh, there weren't just Native Americans over here. There were Egyptians and Hebrews. So
Hmm.
that's another thing that I wanted to
Yeah.
touch on maybe today. It's like to try and complete this picture as best we can, we have to
Yeah.
acknowledge, I think, Phoenicians and Egyptians
Hmm.
and all the other types of people that were coming over here.
Yeah. I came across I haven't posted it yet because I just found it the other day. What it says is science is stumped by strange mummies in Utah. Um, not possible, no possible explanation yet to account for the red-headed, wavy-haired, perhaps white race in America thousands of years before the Indians or even the cliff dwellers. So they found these individuals kind of below. So you can see there's a cliff dwelling. Let's see if I get the lighting right. There's a cliff dwelling city or
Hmm.
room, and way down below it, there's burials, like underneath it, and they found these red-haired mummies underneath it.
Hmm.
And there's a picture of the one of the ladies, a red-haired lady mummy, kind of sitting here. So I'm gonna post it soon.
Yeah.
Um, I just found it the other day, and
That's so fun.
in show prep for your show, I was like, let me see what I can find in some ancient cities, and I just start digging and finding. I found all kinds of weird stuff. But here's one from Nevada. Actually, hold on. While we're at this, there's one I want to talk about. So we were just talking about the red-haired people that were there. Um, there it is. This was Utah. So this area here is like Utah, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. All of this, I'm kind of finding similar types of cities and peoples. Um, so here's a man that was discovered, or some people 1894 is the Daily Public Ledger. Salt Lake City, Utah. Charles A. Lang, an explorer from Pittsburgh, arrived in this city on Wednesday with 7 well-preserved mummies discovered beneath the ruins of cliff dwellers' houses in southeastern Utah. So, what did I just talk about? Was that Nevada? I think it
Yes.
was. Okay, but we've got something similar going on here. So this was beneath the city, the level, and
Yeah.
they were mummies. These mummies are in an extraordinary state of preservation, which is accounted for by the entire absence of moisture from the atmosphere and earth in that district. Among the collection is a male of giant stature, 2 females, and 2 boys. They are not bodies of the cliff dwellers, but of some other race who lived there before them. Their hair is reddish instead of black, as with the cliff dwellers. And that's all it says. So he found, several mummies. The male was giant and he had red hair. Or reddish. So I would say it's auburn, probably. A reddish, a deep red auburn. A lot of times these red-headed giants are stuff that were like more auburn than just fiery red, but I'm sure it could have been either or. But
Yeah. Mummies and urns. I've got an urn here. I'll have to show you this.
okay.
So I think I can tie this in with Out West here in a second too. But I will say that for whatever reason, recently I keep finding all this stuff in Kentucky. So
Mhm.
I have a ton of stuff from Kentucky here. But there were a lot of mummies found in Kentucky as well. I've seen
Mhm.
some articles about that. I saw an article that talked about 3,000 mummies that were
Oh
found in
wow.
caves in Kentucky.
Oh wow.
I should have
Nice.
that article pulled up, but I don't. But this is an urn that was found. Egyptian funerary urn discovered in Kentucky while digging for a basement for someone's new house. 8 men witnessed the removal of the urn from the earth. And what makes me think about Out West and some of these accounts you brought up is this was a thing that I think they were seeing out there as well. They were saying some of the other articles were talking about mummies and uh, high magnitude being found in Colorado as well. So it wasn't just Kentucky, this was out west too. And of
Mhm.
course, you've got all the Egyptian lore associated with the Grand Canyon.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
and of course, mummies galore out there. So I
Yeah.
thought about that while you were talking about out west.
Well, I do remember, I don't have it in front of me, but there was a mummified skeleton or mummy that was found. I believe it was Kentucky or one of those states near there,
Mhm.
right around that area where there was like either a reddish or blonde haired mummy in a cave. So yeah,
Mm,
they were there too. So
yeah. Also,
they,
the Romans. I got something on the Romans too, real quick.
yeah, go for it.
The Because have you heard about the Blandenberg stone? It's
Not familiar, I don't think.
That's also Kentucky. It's one of these out of place artifacts that was found in
Okay.
Kentucky. And so that was, let me see if I have anything on that. I think it was nearby this Roman sword. But anyway, it's all on the river there on the Ohio River, and they were finding this stuff, like coins, swords, and this Blandenberg stone that had these crazy inscriptions on it. But I had a listener recently reach out to me, and he said, "Hey, I remember this article I read about a Roman sword being found." So we tried to find the article, and we couldn't. And I don't usually do chat GPT on this show. I don't usually rely on that at all for anything, but
Hmm.
this is interesting in this case because he was able to find that chat GPT has a memory of this, I guess, of this article. Isn't this
Yeah.
crazy? See,
Yeah.
it says, yes, there is a report that fits what you're remembering. In 1999, a man named Buddy Lemon from Reedland, Kentucky, a short distance from Paducah. That's one of these towns at a confluence of rivers, right on the Ohio.
Hmm.
He found a sword near the mouth of the Tennessee River where it flows into the Ohio using a metal detector. Uh, At the time, it was described by some sources as being identified as a second century Roman artifact. After interviews and photos with Ancient Kentucky Historical Association, the find was noted in connection with other similar claims of Roman swords found along waterways in the United States. And I looked into this a little bit more in this area, in that Paducah area, and they were finding Roman coins out there too on either side of the Ohio River in that Paducah area. And like going back to cities, when you look at places like Paducah, it's at the confluence of waterways, right? And people who, if you listen to the show, you know how important the confluence of waterways is, because like we said earlier, that's where they like to build these cities. It's a very defensible place. So very, very important location once you talk about the Ohio River. It's, it branches off the Mississippi. You're coming up out of the Gulf, right? If we're going to talk about Phoenicians and Egyptians traveling here, the seafarers here, they're coming up into the Gulf, coming up into the Mississippi. They're going to come up the Mississippi. It splits off into the Ohio. There's a town there called Cairo, like very Egyptian.
Yeah,
And
right.
then the next town up is called Joppa. That's also a port in Israel,
Yep.
ancient Israeli port. Then you get to Paducah, and it fits the bill for a place where they'd have an ancient settlement. Then you get up into Evansville, and what's
Mhm.
at Evansville? Angel Mounds. What is Angel? They say, if you look in the Angel Mound site, they say, oh, Angel was a city. It was an ancient city here. So it's all up this river. It's the whole Ohio River. I mean,
It
what is
is.
it?
Yeah.
It's 980 miles from Cairo to Pittsburgh. So I would say I think Cairo as well is like an ancient settlement, and I definitely believe Pittsburgh is. So I just think the whole waterway is littered with these.
Well, yeah, it has to be. And a lot of these waterways, what were they? They were the highways of the day,
Yeah.
right? That's the way they traversed into the interior of the country. That was the fastest way to get anywhere, because you know how thick woods are. And even still, there's so many forests along these riverways. If you just, drive down I-40 or, or the Appalachian Mountains, so thick with forests, it's hard to traverse through that stuff. But the waterways were just a quick way to get up into these areas.
Mhm.
And,
And
yeah, go for it.
no, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to
No.
say I just want to say I think that they were wider then than they are now. But go ahead.
Yeah. I came across an article a few years ago. The possibility, this guy did a lot of researching and surveying that a lot of the bayous, closer to the mouth of the Mississippi, a lot of the bayou systems were canals. And so I want to look into that again, that he believed the mound builders were building canal systems for maybe, moving goods, to their cities, from the rivers.
Hmm.
So he said a lot of these bayous were more like square,
Hmm.
they were straight. They didn't flow quite like rivers do, right? Rivers snake, they always snake. But these were more square or straight. And so that was his theory.
Yeah.
I need to find this again, because I think that's very fascinating. And it shows that there was a lot of manpower and like, well, you look at these mounds, like some of these mounds, they say, well, it took so many baskets and this is how many years. But okay, but who are these giants that are buried in these mounds, right? It
Hmm.
didn't take them that long, and they were digging. How were they digging? Um, what kind of tools did they have? And a lot of times in the north, they have copper tools or copper weapons you find. So they were using metal, a lot of metal things, artifacts, and so. But
Yeah. I'm trying to
yes,
pull something up here. It might not work for me right now, but there's a couple of things that I thought of there with what you were talking about. One is an article. I don't think I'll be able to find it in time, but I've showed an article on the show before in Missouri where they found an ancient canal up there.
really,
Yeah, very long. It's one of Fritz Zimmerman's finds,
okay,
or
yeah,
at least he
I
found.
love Fritz, yeah,
Yeah, he found an article about this where in Missouri they were showing that these people, mound builders,
hmm
probably were building these long straight canals. And what I was looking for just now, and I have these pictures in my phone, it's If you look at New Orleans,
Hmm.
the very southern part of New Orleans, where the road ends. I've been down there. There's a road that goes as far as it'll go, and it ends right there at the Gulf. It looks like swampland right there, um, and bayou. But if you look at it on the map, there's all these straight lines cut into what looks to be a swamp. It's like, why are these straight lines there?
Really?
Yeah, I got to show you this because I mean,
Yeah, I've not heard of this. I haven't done that. I haven't looked at that.
it would perfectly fits in with what I think you're suggesting there. I'm gonna see if I have a picture of this, man. The map on this on my computer doesn't always want to work for me, especially in the middle of a podcast. But
Yeah.
here, I was looking at this the other day, and we'll see if this shows up on the thing. But do you see? So that's New Orleans. Do you see all
Okay.
these straight lines here? There's there's a bunch of straight lines down there. Do you see them?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I do.
There's nothing
Yeah.
there.
Really?
Yeah, that's just swamp.
That's a canal. That has to be some sort of a
That's what I'm
canal.
saying. What caught my eye is that so the red dot is where the road ends. That's as
Oh,
far down
okay.
as you can go in New Orleans. And right next to it, there's this weird circular looking canal. You see that?
Yep. Yep.
And then you see all those other straight lines.
Yeah. So maybe that
So
guy was onto something.
this is just me looking around on Google Earth. I think
Yeah.
Fritz was onto something too with the Missouri stuff. I think you're onto something with this whole notion.
Yeah, so they found some Roman artifacts and they
Mhm.
were going up the rivers. You have these pre-existing probably before Roman era, I would guess, these mound builders building these canals and
See,
waterways.
yeah, I think
So,
Roman, I think that was a broad term they were using for Mediterranean, personally.
gotcha. Yeah.
That's what I think.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because I mean,
Hmm.
it's right there. It's Rome is part of the Mediterranean culture. I think that was a
Yeah.
term they were using because there were so many different people groups in the Med.
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know,
And the Romans kind of took over a lot of people groups. They took over
yeah,
the Gauls. They took over the Celts, which Gauls are Celts. There's so many Celtic tribes that they took over. But there's a whole lot of there were a lot of Celts and stuff that would go be warriors they would hire out for warriors for other armies and stuff. And so who's to say if a Roman actually wielded that sword or if it was another person,
who's to say?
right? Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
I've
But
got
that, yeah.
another one here of yours. Let's see
Okay.
if I can find it. That I think this kind of fits into what we're talking about here. And there's two of these, and this has to do with the Canary Islands. And I got these straight from
Oh,
your
yeah.
Instagram page because I mean, think about it. The Mediterranean, the, there's this area right here between northern Africa and southern Spain where there's a little opening there.
Right.
And it's said that the Carthaginians controlled that for a very long time, the mouth of the
Hmm.
Atlantic, the
Hmm.
the gateway to Atlantis. The
Yeah.
Carthaginians controlled that and they wouldn't let people pass. They had the old Phoenician maps. They had all the Phoenician knowledge. They knew about I
Yeah.
think they knew about America or whatever it was called, and they
Oh,
kept
yeah.
that information secret for a while. Well, right outside of that gateway, you have the Canary Islands, and this
Uh-huh.
is another place that's interesting to consider because if we want to talk about Nephilim, especially, what you had was a group of people who settled in the Canary Islands called the Guanches,
Yes.
said to be giants or men of tall stature with light skin, blue eyes, and light hair, descendants of the Canaanites.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm thinking about that whenever I see you find these kind of articles, right? And
Yeah.
this is one that was found in West Virginia, Grave Creek Mound, many years ago in opening a mound or an ancient burial place on Grave Creek, West Virginia, or Virginia. An oval stone was found with 3 lines of inscription with some written languages. I'll skip down. Oh, he says, oh, it's W.B. Hodson of Savannah.
Hmm.
For a while, a consul of the United States in Barbary, Africa. So this guy spent time in Africa, and now he lives in New York. And he assigned to this inscription Numidian origins. In his notes on North Africa, he said, near one of the skeletons in the upper vault was found the stone in question with 3 lines of alphabetic characters. It is of oval form, 3/4 of an inch thick, and its material is a fine sandstone. This is the only example, I believe, of ancient alphabetic inscription in North America. The inscription on the Dighton Rock and the pictorial writings of Mexico and Yucca are symbolic but not alphabetic. So he's trying to say that this is, I guess, at his time, he believes this is the only find like it, but there's more to it here. I got the second part here. I had first regarded it as apocryphal. I'm trying to remember. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Who was the gorgeous chieftain whose engraved signet was found by its side? Did he come from the Canary Islands, where the Numidian characters and language prevailed? Shall we something to lost Atlantis?
Hmm.
Could any of the Carthaginian or African vessels which usually visited the Fortunate or Canary Islands have been carried to the New World? So they're speculating at this point, but I think it's funny they do mention Atlantis there. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring this up because I think it's I mean, it's kind of interesting that they found this in Virginia or West Virginia, I think.
Yeah. Yep. It is. And a lot of those, the Guanches, they kind of remind me of like those red-haired mummies in like Nevada and New Mexico. They look very similar. At least the picture that I just came across remind me of some the Guanches mummies that I've seen pictures of,
Hmm.
from the Canary Islands there.
Yeah, one of the stories there is that Joshua and Caleb in the Bible were pushing all these giants out of the Middle East, and they got pushed out so far that they ended up trying to go to the ends of the earth, essentially. And some of them ended up all the way at the other end of Africa on the coast and jumping off into the Canary Islands. And
Hmm.
isn't it interesting that if you get in a boat there, the natural Gulf Stream, the natural currents of the ocean carry you straight to North America
Yeah.
from the Canary Islands. It's
Yeah.
all too perfect. It all
It
lines
is.
up perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
A listener sent me this info on the Brandenburg stone too. I just got it pulled up here. It's
Oh, sweet.
limestone tablet. And that's the thing, like this guy in this article I just read was acting like they weren't finding these tablets. I they were finding, maybe he just wasn't aware, but I see articles all the time where they were finding these tablets.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this one, it said, is described as looking ancient with a strange exotic language. This is the one from Kentucky. And some were saying that it was a form of ancient Welsh,
Okay.
possibly linked to Prince Madoc.
Yeah.
There's another people group for us to throw in
Uh,
the
yeah,
Bible.
to throw in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you know what? They've come. So I have a book. It's called America BC by
Oh
Dr.
yeah.
Barry Fell. And he talks about all this stuff from the old world that was found here. You find Ogham, and yeah, there you go. There it is. Dude, that's a great book.
I love this book.
Just in my, researching around and hiking around, I've found sandstones that look like they have Ogham inscriptions on them. It's just like it. And I'm in Texas, but they say it was found in Oklahoma and Colorado. Why not Texas? I think this stuff is still all over the place. I think it's still yet to be found, some of this stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what it looks like, Travis. It looks like Ogham. Here's a picture
Yeah.
of the Brandenburg stone, and that's exactly what I thought. I was like, that's it. Well, it reminds me of Ogham.
It could be a branch off of it. It could be
Mhm.
Celtiberian, which the Celtiberians, well, they were a mixture of the Iberians and the Celts.
Mhm.
And then there's Iberian, that's a little
Mhm.
different than Celtiberian. Yeah, yeah. Who were these people, right?
Well, that's the thing, that Iberia, uh,
Hmm.
Spain, France, borders the Mediterranean. It seems like all the people that came over here, many of them, I'll just say many of them, come from the Mediterranean or Mediterranean adjacent lands. That seems to be the common theme, because I think that was the hub of ancient man who knew how to navigate using the stars and traverse oceans.
Right.
It's just centered in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, and even Fritz Zimmerman's studies, he connects a lot of these giants to the Amorites
Mm,
from the Mediterranean, right there in the Bible lands, like right there in Canaan. They were a tribe of Canaanites living within the land, and that big war that Joshua had was against, I think it was 5 kings of the Amorites from the hill country. So that means that was five. That was 5 of them. I think there were other tribes of Amorites, but 5 of them came down and fought against him.
mm.
So that's what Fritz says. A lot of them were Amorites because he looks into, like, he kind of traces them from the Levant all the way up through to the British Isles, and then he sees he does really good at, like, looking at what they did in the British Isles and looking at what they did, like mounds and hinges, the circular ditches around mounds, and they're very similar,
Yeah, for
across the
sure.
pond there.
Yeah, for sure.
It's,
I think he's onto something with the Amorites. Those were also Canaanites,
hmm
and they were called the Amorites because of their chief deity, Amaru.
hmm
They named themselves after the god they worshipped. And it's interesting that you see that word popping up over here as well, even into the title of America itself, potentially. Amaru, Amaruka.
that's interesting.
And I believe the Canaanites were coming over here. So they would have
Yeah.
brought with them worship of this god Amaru. And I just see that definitely as a candidate for why we called it America in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they weren't, like, full-blooded Amorite or Rephaites, but
Mm,
they were definitely had the lineage,
they
right?
had the lineage.
They had the lineage. They might have mixed in with other people groups, but they had the lineage and traditions of the Canaanites
For
for
sure.
sure.
I
Yeah.
think that's why you see some of these when you look into some of these chiefs, they were I think they were mixed with
hmm
the well, let's just say yeah, they had the lineage. They may not have been. It's like you said, they may not have been full blown Rephaim, which for
hmm
people listening, the giants before the flood were called the Nephilim. The Bible says they were in the earth in those days before and after. So somehow that gene survived. And I looked into it and it seems to have arisen in the Canaanites. However, that happened,
hmm
I don't know. But the Nephilim gene survives the flood, shows back up in the midst of the Canaanites. Then they become known as the Rephaim, the post-flood giants, just for people listening. And
hmm
yeah, I think for sure the Canaanites came over here. I think in the Temecula tribe, that would be one to look into. Their practices were very reminiscent of Canaanites. And Phoenicians were Canaanites as well. We have so
Right.
much evidence that the Phoenicians were over here. But yeah, I want to highlight that point you made though, that some of these they may not have been like full blown Nephilim, but they still carried the genes. They were like kind of like I guess at this point maybe some of the magic had worn off. Maybe some of the stature had dwindled
Yeah.
down. Maybe they're a little bit shorter. They're still giants, but they're a little bit
They're
shorter.
still giants.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's one here in Wisconsin. I mean, some of them are still big, like 13 feet. That's a
Oh
pretty
yeah.
big guy. They may not have been like King Og, one of the Rephaites, or Rephaim. They have different names. I
Mm,
think his bed was, I mean, depends on how you measure a cubit, right?
right. Because it
So,
says
I mean,
9. Isn't
yeah,
it 9
I,
cubits?
I can't remember. I just did the math. And so, like, if you go with the Roman cubit being 18 inches,
Hmm.
but he was pre-Roman time by a long time. And so like if you do more like the Royal Hebrew cubit, that was around 20 to 20 something inches. Well, that's a huge difference when you do the math. So he could have been anywhere up to 15 feet or something like that. Um,
For sure.
so, but this is one from Wisconsin, and this from 1870, they found a prehistoric giant, 13 feet tall, when he was sinking a foundation for his barn. So these guys were all over the place. And yeah, I mean, they weren't all. And so when I post giants, I get a lot of, and I get it. I get it. It makes sense. When I post giants that were 7 feet tall, they're like, that's not a giant. But the reason I post it is because usually it's more than one of them that are 7 feet tall, but it's not just that they were 7 feet tall. It's their bone structure. It's like their skull shape. It's like they're not just 7 foot tall average humans. It's different. Like they're thicker bones, and like a lot of times their foreheads, they don't really have them. They just kind of elongated, sloping back. So
Hmm.
you're looking at a different individual, and who knows how old they were. How do we know that they weren't like 18-year-old, warriors or something? They hadn't grown, fully grown yet or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, seriously. And I've got an article here we could show in a little bit that I got from you, and it talks about those jaws and everything. And we'll get into Ohio, I think, and talk about that because I have some stuff on that. But anyways, like what I'm thinking about right now before we move on is just the story of Tuscaloosa. I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but he was a chief over here when DeSoto came over. DeSoto arrives in this area of that's now Mobile, Alabama, and he meets up with Tuscaloosa's son named Black Panther, and they establish some sort of trust, enough trust for Black Panther to take DeSoto into further into the interior of the country and meet with Tuscaloosa. And DeSoto's got some of his men with him, and they're all shocked whenever they come into his presence because he's a giant. He's surrounded by warriors that are normal height, but he's got himself a throne put up on top of a mound, of course, no
mhm,
doubt, probably channeling that energy. And he's enthroned on the mound. He stands up and he's a giant, and all the other warriors are normal size. I think that goes to show you that this was a gene, and not
mhm,
everybody had it
right.
as well. Like I think it died out, and I think the giants became the rulers of pockets of people, certainly in this
Mhm,
case. And then that story goes on to that story gets wild from there. They throw a feast for DeSoto and his men. It's interesting because they talk about how they had a feast hall, like they had buildings. This was like teepees and fires, like they had buildings and they
Yeah.
had them a feast hall, and they got them drunk and they decided to ambush them. And DeSoto got wise to it because he noticed that Tuscaloosa had been gone for a couple hours, and he went out to look for him. And then he noticed that the warriors were hiding swords and arrows
Oh.
behind palm leaves, and he was like, oh, they're getting ready to. So a war ensues, and they end up killing Black Panther, and Tuscaloosa goes missing. So
Mm.
he goes running
Wow.
out into the wild. I just love the story, but he wasn't it wasn't like a place full of giants. He was like one of the only giants.
Hmm.
So
No,
for what that's worth.
no, that I feel like there's some Cherokee legends about a group of people that ruled over them, and I want to look into this some more. And it was like they had
And
to.
Katani.
Okay, yeah, there were so, and they couldn't do anything about like if these individuals wanted to do something, they couldn't stop them, and so they had to rise against them. And I've kind of had this theory that these weren't just all they weren't necessarily races of just total giants. They had regular people among them, but the hierarchy and the rulers were giants. And I think there were a lot of them, throughout the US, because sometimes in these mounds you'll have regular sized people, but you'll have the male was like a giant. But a lot of times you'll find women that were giants, 8 feet tall.
Mhm.
The males were 9 feet to 10 feet. So but that I think that is true. There were regular people living among them, and these giants were kind of a problem. to the regular sized people,
Hmm.
oftentimes.
Yeah, it's in all the legends. You had the Choctaw. They had the legends of the Nahulo, a white race of giants
Mhm.
that plagued them, drove them underground for some time. This is old Native American legend. This gets into their creation story. I'm pretty sure that the first ancestors of the Choctaw were driven underground because of this race of giants called the Nahulo, and they figured out how to take poison from a poisonous mushroom that grew in the caves, and at night they would sneak out and shoot these little darts into the sleeping giants and kill them that way because they were too powerful to fight them in battle. So that's just one story, right? And like you
Mhm.
said, the Cherokee have the Anukatani, where they weren't able to get rid of them until a plague hit them. And they were able to attack them when they were weak because of this plague. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stood a chance. And then
Yeah.
you've got the Starnaki that's talked about. This, it's I think it's interesting when you look at these names too. If you put those names together, you put Anukatani next to Starnaki. If you mix those together, you could see Anunnaki.
Right. Right. It's very,
and
that's
and
interesting, right?
very quickly you start to see that all these myths have a common thread and a singularity to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was John Smith who went up the Susquehanna River, and he saw some of the latter Susquehannocks, I think is what they called them. But
Yeah.
he described them as being like somewhat giant.
Hmm.
Like he could tell that they were descendants of giants. Like just they were just big framed, huge calves. And I think that's fascinating too, because I found an old report um, from the Susquehanna River area where there was like 60, I think it was 60 something giants skeletons were found and with massive tomahawks. And so, um, battle axes were found alongside them. So what he was seeing was like the trickle down bloodline of what I came across in a news report.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think I looked at the John Smith thing at one point, and I want to say that they said that they were 7 to 8 feet.
Hmm.
So still tall, still have,
Yeah,
in my opinion, they still had the gene,
right.
but they had just kind of dwindled down in height over the years, probably is was what I imagine happened there. There were two giant tribes in Pennsylvania that I came across, one of them being the Susquehannock, the
Yeah.
other being the Allegheny.
Okay.
Both have the rivers named after them. You've got the Allegheny River,
Yeah. Yeah.
and of course you got the Susquehannock River. And the legends about the Allegheny are prevalent. I found them in four different places. Three different tribes, and one of the old Native American books called the Walam Olam talks about this. So this is, for me, this is like undeniable. I don't know why
Yeah.
it's not talked about, but the Allegheny and the Susquehanna. I mean, come on, John Smith. He saw them. Not every. He wasn't the only
Yeah.
person to see them. They were in
Right.
this Pennsylvania area, and the Allegheny. They had. Speaking of these settlements, they had fortifications all along the Mississippi and the Ohio, and that's why I said earlier. I said it with confidence about Pittsburgh, that being an ancient settlement. That
Hmm.
was an ancient Allegheny settlement, because that's exactly where they were said to have had one of their main fortifications was right at this fork in the river. That's Ohio,
Hmm.
Allegheny Fork, right there where Pittsburgh is. So the Delaware, they called them the Allegheny, or no, the Delaware actually called them the Tallagheny, which means ancient ones.
Yeah.
So
That's wild. And that's where you would have fortifications right there at
yeah.
right there.
Hmm. Oh, that man, the Allegheny rabbit hole goes deep, Travis. You gotta fall down that one
I do.
sometime.
Yeah. Dude,
They
these
talk
rabbit
about a
holes do
war.
go deep. They
They
go
talk about
so
it.
deep.
Yeah, they do, man. They talk about an all-out war that the natives banded together to try and defeat them in this case. It was a Delaware Lenape Iroquois.
Oh,
They
wow.
the Delaware Lenape joined up with the Iroquois, who later became the Cherokee. And so the
Right.
Cherokee have this myth too. They have it preserved because this was their ancestors. They banded together and fought the Alajiwi and took their lands, took Pittsburgh. Because I'll tell you something, man. I did a road trip across Pittsburgh one time, or Pennsylvania, I should say. I went from like Philly to the all the way to the Ohio border. Beautiful state. And outside of Pittsburgh, I saw a historical marker, and it talked about how in the 1700s, and it gave a date, and I looked up the date, and this was before they say Pittsburgh was a city, right? I
Hmm.
looked it up. I remember thinking, oh, this was before they even say Pittsburgh was here. But anyway, on the plaque, it talks about these settlers who had come into the area, and they stood in that field, and they pulled out their rifles and they fired 4 or 5 shots off in unison, and they were answered by a roar of 100 guns from over the hill from the Native Americans. And so they announced their presence and they sat down with the natives. And the whole reason why they did that, they had this meeting. They were asking the natives if they could put in a trading store for furs
Hmm.
at the fork in the river where Pittsburgh is. Why why would they want to put a store there unless it was already a town?
Right.
It
Some
would have
sort
been
of
out of the way. I mean, it's if you've ever looked at Pittsburgh, like you need boats and bridges to get to that location.
hmm
It's not a unless it was already a area of commerce.
Right.
They wanted to put a
Yeah.
storefront in. It was already a city there. It had to have been. I'm not saying it was like Tartaria with like
Yeah.
ornate buildings and, Atlantis pyramids and stuff like that. I just think that there was already something there.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
I think that these Native Americans, when they defeated the Alajiwi, they moved in there and they started living in that city. It's just been a city this whole time.
Oh, yeah. I do need to look into the a lot more of the Native American lore. I just focus on like grabbing
Oh yeah.
whatever bits and stuff, but I tell you, I'm so fascinated by it. And what we need is a book with all the quotes from all these ancient tribal leaders that of their passed down knowledge. You
Hmm.
know, wouldn't that be amazing to
Oh, it
have
would be.
that? And maybe there is something like that, but I would love that if
Yeah.
if we had
It
something
would
like
be
that.
it's a great idea. It would be convincing to people.
Hmm.
I saw a list. I did this for a show once. So I compiled a list of all the early explorers that saw giants. And a lot of this was in South America.
Yeah.
But after you get to like the 10th explorer, you're pretty sold that the giants existed and that these
Yeah.
guys came over here and saw them. You
Right.
know, that DeSoto Tuscaloosa story is just one of many, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's there's Fritz Zimmerman goes over one, I forget where it's at, but it's the Curse of Yellow Hair. And that was up in the northeast, I think.
That's to do with Louisville, actually.
Oh, is it? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of it is, yeah.
Some of it. Okay. Yeah. So that's another, light skinned, blondish, reddish haired giant, from up there.
Mhm.
And I don't know if all of his people were giants, but it described him as being one.
Mhm.
And sun worshippers, and it's just, and that's another Shawnee, like a Shawnee tale or something like that, or oral tradition or oral story passed down
Yeah,
from
for
their
sure.
times.
For sure, man. I think I have one in the Pennsylvania region that I can show you real quick.
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Now I'm thinking about I've got Alajiwi on the brain here. I think I've got yeah, here it is. This is where George Washington decided to put a city, and he called it Washington, PA.
Okay. Oh,
You may have actually seen this one too, but it's Washington County, It says prehistoric giant bones are found. Washington County mounds give up a secret race that vanished 10,000 years ago. It says 49 skeletons were found here by archaeologists.
Mm.
Let's see. All the skeletons seem okay. Here we go. Here we go. I'll start a little bit before that. Noticed bodies side by side, and the bodies were side by side and head to toe around the periphery of the huge ring. Some of this is cut off, unfortunately. It was covered with small stones lay on its back. Okay, here, this is the part I wanted to read. All the skeletons seem to have massive jaws, little chins, and strong teeth when polished, showing a gloss in the sunlight, indicating the almost total absence of tartar. This proved, Fisher stated, that they apparently had massive chewing muscles and that these are ancient people who were meat eaters. Never in all my discoveries of Indians, remarked Fisher, have I seen strong, well-preserved teeth such as these. He has exhumed 445 bodies in his career, and he says that these are the most well-preserved teeth that he can find. And it says they found 2 clay ovens to the east and west of the circle. Fisher's party discovered beneath debris and fallen trees 2 clay ovens. This, it is believed, were used to bake the bodies before they were buried. Okay.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to this and this old city, this whole city settlement factor here,
Yeah.
where I think some of our founding fathers came in and decided to, put cities right on top of some of these older locations that were settlements.
Yeah, because there's a lot of places out like, West Virginia, places like that. You still have some of these massive burial mounds that are still within the city, right? Some of them that didn't get destroyed.
Yeah.
And, the locals are like, oh, it's just that mound. But like, what was that mound? Who's buried in it? And that's a great point because that was just the burial place. Like, what were the cities like? And for the longest time, I didn't know that there were, ancient fortifications and ancient cities in America. But there were stone forts, supposedly. There were, all these fortifications with walls, 10 feet high. There's another one here that I'll try to document more of these, post them.
Yeah.
There was one.
It's fairly new to me too, Travis. This is something that I came across a couple of years ago, looking into Nashville, and I realized that Nashville is one of these ancient cities. And so I started looking more into it, and I've just been gathering information since then, but it's still relatively new to me. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I came across recently was this guy right here, Roger G. Kennedy.
Wow, nice.
He worked for the Smithsonian. I think he was really high up in the Smithsonian. Maybe he was a director of the Smithsonian. I don't remember exactly what his title was, but he flat out says it.
Really?
He says that Nashville, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and St. Louis were built on ancient cities.
Wow.
He flat out says it, man.
That's a great book to have.
I caught it in an interview. There's this very rare interview of him online, kind of an obscure interview.
Yeah.
And I heard him say it, and I wrote his name down real quick. I'm like, I can't believe this guy just said that.
Yeah.
I wrote his name down. I looked him up. He's legit. And then I found out he has this book, and he talks about it in this book.
Hidden Cities. Dude, I've got to get my hands on that book. I got to get my hands on that one.
This is a gem right here. They say it's this. I don't know why this is not talked about in schools, but it's the truth, y'all. I'm telling you, it's the truth.
Gosh. We need our history to be talked about and taught. No, there's a giant mound builders built many hill fortifications, and here's one that is rising 800 feet above the Ohio River in Highland County, Ohio. It's called Fort Hill, and it's approximately 50 acres. And it's one of these fortifications. I don't know. Let me get the lighting
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right. Um, and it's one I got out of this old Squire and Davis book, one that they reported on. It's made of earth and stone. The wall is over a mile and a half in length, and it ranges from six to 15 feet in height, and it's 40 feet thick, and it has 33 gateways or openings within the wall.
Wow.
So, and it's, right along, it looks like it's kind of along the snaking part of the Ohio River.
That would
So,
be up on a hill, right?
yeah, it was like a hill fort, basically. Kind of like Chief Rolling Thunder talked about.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, just another one of those. So I think I want to start looking into these a little more because I was just focused on their burial rites and who's buried in them, not so much their cities, right? I mean, I have, found like here's one long lost city in Nevada. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but they were calling it Pueblo Grande in Nevada. It's a long lost city believed to have been a primitive people of giant stature who ruled Western America centuries before the dawn of history, is today being gradually restored from the ages of excavators working under M.R. Harrington, director of the Museum of the American Indian, who is heading the Hay Foundation expedition into the unknown prehistoric metropolis of the Muddy and Virgin River valleys near here. So Mr. Harrington, has excavation uncovered evidence that the once lost city will prove to be the largest prehistoric city ruin in the Western Hemisphere. I'm going to skip ahead. It's a really long article.
Oh, yeah.
Big,
Wait, read that last part again.
okay.
He said it was one of the biggest
Yeah,
cities
the
found.
largest prehistoric ruin or city ruin in the Western Hemisphere. One of
Wow.
them. It's a lost city.
And where's this at
Uh,
again? I missed that part.
This is in Nevada, Pueblo Grande, Nevada. Nevada's a long lost city.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's believed to have been that of primitive people of giant stature,
There you
as
go.
how the article goes. This is from 1925, a report from 1925.
I've got one for you. I just now
Yeah.
thought about this. This is so that was in Nevada, right?
Yep.
This one's in Arizona. Ebbing Lake. Okay. Now this is now called Roosevelt Lake in
Okay.
Arizona. Ebbing Lake bears ancient city in Arizona with apartments bigger than park avenues. The drought in Arizona and the lowering of the waters of Roosevelt Lake near Globe, Arizona, have exposed the ruins of what was once the biggest city in America, according to an announcement yesterday by the American Museum of Natural History. The big town, which is somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 years old, is being explored by American Museum archaeologists who were sent there by Mrs. William Boyce Thompson, wife of the copper and oil man. In addition to its interest as a metropolis of the prehistoric Southwest, the place is of importance because its pottery is of a new type and resembles that of Mexico, indicating that at the time, well, I think this was cut off too. Sorry about that, guys.
No,
Let's see. Because the first rain will cause the lake to submerge most of the main ruin, it's just saying how I think it came to be because of the dry season.
right.
But Miss Thomas, a keen archaeologist, see this is legit people who looked into this, right?
Hmm.
Miss Thomas, a keen archaeologist who has financed expeditions to Cyprus, Egypt, and Peru, provided the funds for this research when she learned that specimens of pottery were of unusual design to come out of the Roosevelt Lake region. So let's see, is there anything else here? Her party traced these relics back to the point of origin and discovered America's oldest big city. So, why is this stuff not talked about? It was
Yeah.
found. Why
Yeah.
didn't they? It's like this lady knows her stuff. She studied Cyprus and Egypt and Peru. It's like,
Yeah.
what did she find that I guess the powers that be did not want put in the history books or what? Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess, that's speculation, but
Right.
my point is like, did she find a Cypriot connection? Like,
Hmm.
was there that Mediterranean connection to these people? Who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because you were reading about Arizona. I have one here, and it is no remains of people were found, but they found in 1901 it's a turquoise queen uh, mine. They found an old mine. This is one of the prehistoric turquoise mines which abound in this portion of Arizona. And let's see here. At the spring, the surrounding cliffs are covered with hieroglyphics, which the most learned scientists have failed to interpret. The same rock writing is found near the turquoise deposits at the mineral park. The turquoise queen mine is situated on the top of a sharp ridge, and the old working is a hole 30 feet wide and about the same depth. This opening was literally pounded out of solid rock with stone hammers. These hammers are still scattered around the hole by the dozens. Some of them are immense size, being much as 14 inches long and weigh from 20 to 30 pounds, showing that they must have been wielded by a giant race. So here you go. That's Arizona. And you have some miners in Arizona that are wielding some 30-pound hammers that are 14 inches long.
It's
So maybe
crazy.
they lived in that prehistoric city
Yeah.
right there in Arizona.
Yeah, I saw this episode of America on Earth a while back, and they were talking about that rock wall. I think it's
Hmm.
called Rockwall, Texas.
Right. Yeah.
And they had dug up part of the wall, and I just thought it was interesting that one of the things that they were showing on camera there was that what appeared to be these giant steps,
Hmm.
not steps for normal people, but steps for giants.
Yeah.
And of course, I think that Rockwall, Texas, or that rock wall is an actual wall. I think it's an ancient city wall, personally.
Hmm.
I know they took some samples on that show and they thought it was not they thought it
Yeah.
was natural, but I didn't really agree with that.
Yeah. I
So,
went and looked at that
oh,
myself.
really?
I
What do you
did.
think?
I think there are portions of it that are real old rock walls that were built by men,
There you go.
by giants, because they have a section of the wall that is reconstructed, and you can go see it. It was moved from private property, and these stones are 7 feet long, and they're all the same. They're all the same size as far as width. So they stacked it wrong. What they did, they stacked it wrong. They should have stacked it upright, but they stacked it flat. So the stones are like 18 inches. They would have been 18 inches tall by probably 8 to 10 inches thick or 12 inches thick. But the lady there was calling it a mortar. She's like, yeah, it's the way they stacked it to where the mortar is facing you. And it was like a crystal type. It was crystallized, whatever it is. It's not on the face of the stones, only the top and bottom and the edges of the stones. And the stones seem to have been worked to have like a beveling on all the edges. And so
Mm,
my take with the show, maybe that portion wasn't, but where they took their samples were very close to each other. And they didn't go like way far. They
yeah,
stayed right there. And I don't know, you know what I mean? I don't know about
I
that.
know.
They have a portion of that's reconstructed at the old courthouse that you can go see as well, and those look man-made. So I think yes,
Yep.
there were parts of them that were man-made, maybe some parts that weren't, but like obviously there were giants around here because I found this giant trackway
I
on a
was going to ask
riverbed
you, yeah.
not far from where I'm from, and these are real footprints in the bedrock. And this guy would have been between 9 to 10 feet tall. It's
Can you go into that? How did you find that?
well back in 2023, there was a drought here, and I went down there. It was probably about a half-mile hike from where you could park a vehicle, and I just had to walk down the river. But I didn't see this particular trackway then. I just discovered this one in last September when I went down there again. And this is the best set of tracks that I've found. There was an old book that somebody wrote. Um, I have a buddy, Nate Henry, for Blurry Creatures, called me and he said, "Hey, there's this book I found, and it says something about Valley of the Giants or something." He's like, "That's like really close to where you live. How about you go check it out?" I was like, "I'd never heard of this. I've heard of the dinosaur tracks." So I went down there and I found a bunch of these tracks, and I was shocked. And so I went again in September, and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's about six consecutive footprints, and then it just disappears into the river. There's still water in the river up here.
Mhm.
So, and every footprint was the same length, 16 or 17 inches, and they were all 52 inches from heel to heel, every one of them. Left, right, left, right, left, right. It wasn't a dinosaur. It was a man, because you could see the heel, you could see the arch. They were about 3 inches deep. So wherever he stood was mud then.
Mhm.
So it wasn't a perfect toe, right? Because it was mud, but it was a man. And I was just so, I was, yeah, I was astonished, but I was so excited to find this track way. And, I find, rocks that resemble, battle axes, old tomahawk looking primitive axe heads in the area of these footprints. And so you have Rockwall, Texas, not far from here. You have these real giant man tracks right here in a riverway. We were talking about riverways and how they use them to navigate, and they live there because of water. They brought their food came to drink there. The deer, whatever they were hunting, came there. Um,
And it was called the Valley of the Giants.
yeah, yeah, it's just a little booklet called Valley of the Giants, and
And
it's
you
just
go down
documenting.
there.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
there's
go to the
giant
Valley of the
footprints.
Giants, and there's giant footprints there still.
I think sometimes it's just that simple with this
Yeah.
this whole, when you get into this subject. Sometimes it's just that simple. Like the evidence is you just look, and the evidence will present itself to you. I think, and I mean, that's a great find. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm glad,
Yeah.
that's a great find, but it was just that simple. It's like, oh, there's a place called the
Oh, yeah, I
Valley
know
of
what
the
you mean.
Giants. Let's check it out.
Yeah. Right. And then and so I hit other riverbeds around here and I find, things that look like, I wet it out with water. I found the footprint and a lot of these have their toes are flat. A lot of them have flat across of, my toes are more like angled slightly,
Yeah.
but maybe it's because I'm wearing shoes all the time. But,
Oh yeah, it's
anyway,
interesting.
that my foot is right here. So
Oh, I
this
see
one's
now.
like around 30 inches.
Oh my
And
goodness, that's
this is not the
huge.
same river. And then I found another one, the other one is up here. So
Are
it was like
were
one,
these all the
two.
same size?
Yeah, these two were the same size. And then I found another trackway of the same 30-inch ones. And I've counted like 6 or 7 consecutive footprints. And that was in 2023 when I found these. But there across the river from this, there are hundreds of mounds. Just, they're not documented. It's on Army Corps property. Nobody knows that they're there. Well, I talked to a guy that I know that grew up there, and I said, "Hey, what about those mounds?" And he said, "Yeah," he said those were he said he called them the Indian mounds. I'm like, okay, I think we're maybe onto something here. There's a lot of mounds on this side of the river. Over here, there's footprints. There's actually a megalithic looking dolmen that I found. Me and my son found one along that same river. So I think that was an ancient city right there. And I think they just lived right there. I actually found what I think is an earthwork that goes up onto a mountain right there. So there's a mountain bluff that overlooks the river. and there's an old looking earthen road that is cut. It's almost too narrow for a car, but it's built and it goes right up the edge of this mountain and it goes down to the river. So I think that it's an old city or something that's up there. And it goes down the river to the river, and you would cross the river, and then you would eventually get to the mounds, and they have like, I called it the pathway of the dead. It's like an ancient road cut out and straight. That's how I found this. I found it on um, Google Earth is how I found it. I was like, what is that line? Well, it's like a straight road. It's a little ways off the river, but to the left or to the right of it are all these mounds. So it's like as one person or a king would die, they would dig more of the dirt and they would mound it over them. And so you end up having this long pathway.
Mhm.
So I think I found an old city right there, like a giant for the giants live there.
Yeah. Now, this is all in the same area as these
Yeah.
footprints?
Uh-huh.
Did you
Yeah.
say it was is it Army Corps of Engineers?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's right next to the river.
Well,
So
that's,
it's protected.
yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah.
What I've found is that they're closely associated with a lot of these ancient sites.
Hmm.
Um, I did a whole show on this. I've done two at this point,
Oh, wow.
where we found these dams were put in right next to these ancient sites.
Oh,
And I won't get into all of that today, but in a lot of those cases, it was the Army Corps of Engineers who did the dams. So I keep seeing them associated with the sites. And I mean, this might get into you say a lot of people have said that the military bases are on these, for lack of a better term, ancient sites as well, like ley line locations or
yeah.
sacred ground. I think
Yeah.
it's similar to this concept that the Catholic Church, they would put their cathedrals right on the pagan sites, right? Well, there's an
Yeah.
argument that the military has done something similar to that, and we could call it conspiracy theory, but
Yeah.
it's
It's
an
almost
interesting
like
theory.
I kind of see it as okay, they know it's there. They kind of like it. We're not going to talk about it though,
Right.
but we're going to protect it in a way
Well,
that it doesn't go away. Yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. It's like I don't think they hate it. I think they just don't want to talk about it. It's suppressed history, maybe. We're not going to talk about it because it doesn't go with narratives, but we're not going to destroy them all. But it's just, you can't do anything with it. It's all our land. It's
mhm.
I don't know. Maybe that's a weird thought, but like
No,
it's definitely protected and nobody's going to build a house or knock them down right there. A lot of these mounds and, they were very close to riverways because that's where they lived and they're, the fortifications. I should really poke around some more up on top of where I found that, like that earthen road. I call it an
oh man.
earthwork. I call it an earthwork because that's what they are. They're earthworks. And it's just forgotten, trees growing in it, all that stuff. That's really old.
For people listening, I mean, that's a wow, what a spot you've got there, a research zone, I guess. It's like for
Yeah.
people listening, one of the pictures you just showed me of your foot up against this footprint was
Hmm.
unbelievable. Like this thing is three times the size
Yeah.
of your foot, I guess at least.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there's that other footprint where it's like the toes are the same length.
Yeah. I found that a
Imagine,
lot.
like look at your foot. Most people,
Hmm.
you look at your foot and your pinky's down here and your big toes up here, and
Right. It's more of
this
an
person
angle.
this person had flat, like
Yeah. It's more
they were the
flat.
same length. That's weird,
I
man.
find that to be pretty true to a lot of these footprints that I
That's
find.
that looks like a fin or a flipper or
It
something you
does.
would use to swim with.
Maybe they were wearing sandals more or something like that. But obviously, some of these were just barefooted for maybe they were on hard times. You know, People have asked me, it's like, well, how do what's the difference between that or maybe it's a Bigfoot or Sasquatch footprint? It's like, well, I don't
Hmm.
know, but I'm finding stone implements, and I don't think that Sasquatches are making axe heads. Yeah, right.
Right.
And you know, not going to say they don't do burial mounds, but I think a lot of these burial mounds are ancient. So
Hmm. Yeah, I think that this was an ancient people group, and
for sure.
they were giants, and
Yeah,
maybe their feet look different, man. It's
I
just
think they did. I mean, we
they were
know that,
bigger and
yeah,
different.
they were different. Yeah, we can't really compare them quite like to ourselves because, you don't really get to see them walking into Walmart, so we don't really know what they look like. But yeah, from what I can tell, and I have one that I'm holding on to, I haven't shown anybody, but
Oh
this
yeah.
thing that, yeah, it's a footprint. It wasn't super muddy where the guy stepped, but you can see all of his toes, and I can put my foot sideways at the where his toes are, right? And my foot is not doesn't go the whole width of his foot, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
So it's more than my foot's around 11 to 12 inches, and his foot is wider than my foot is long, and you can see his toe prints. So I'm hanging on to that one, for a while, but I took a picture and
Okay,
documented it. So,
that's cool. Was
but isn't
that
that isn't
in?
that crazy?
It's
It's right
crazy.
in the same area,
Same area.
same river. Yeah, maybe a couple miles from where the mounds are.
Yeah, didn't I hear some stories that came out a while back about a similar situation in Texas where there was a park out there, and I think what I heard was that there were footprints there and they were destroyed. Do you know anything
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. Same. That's where I found this actual set of footprints is outside of this park, of that park you're talking about.
Oh,
That was
okay.
called Dinosaur Valley State Park. Now, where the mounds are, and that bigger footprint I showed you, the 30-inch ones, that's as a crow flies, it might be 20 miles from that park. So it's not really that far.
No.
It's a different river, but they feed into the same bigger, larger river that runs down to the Gulf. So, it's really close.
Hmm.
Really. I mean, who knows? The ones from that state park where they removed some of the footprints in the 70s. I believe it was the 70s or 80s. They removed the footprints from the riverbed because it was no longer acceptable to talk about that. So they actually destroyed the evidence of the footprints. They used to call them caveman tracks, but it's very well
Oh.
could have been the same complex of giants, that lived in this area, stretching from
Was
Rockwall to here.
oh, okay, so rock walls involved. Were they footprints next to dinosaur prints or something like that?
Yes, there is a footprint in a creation evidence museum in that same town with a man track and a dinosaur track overlapping. Now that's only an 11-inch man track, but it's not a giant's footprint, but it is a man track. And so yeah, that's kind of weird. So there's, dragon footprints, if you want to call them that,
Hmm.
within the same area of these man tracks. And that's
Oh,
a whole other theory. How old were those dinosaurs,
yeah. And you say that this is on a river system that goes into the Gulf. How far from the Gulf is this
Oh,
area?
this is North Texas, so it's a ways
Okay,
from the Gulf.
I got
Um,
you.
but the Brazos River does go down towards the Gulf, really close to the Gulf, if not into it.
Yeah.
And these river systems feed into the larger Brazos. The Brazos is a bigger river in Texas. It's probably the largest river, widest river. And I think the Spaniards used it to navigate on when they were here because of that. It winds through mountains and stuff. They can go up it. Um,
Yeah. That's what I was
so
going to ask you next.
mhm.
Were they able to sail that? I mean, I think they did that with the
Yeah,
Rio Grande for sure.
yeah. I go up that. I go on canoe trips down that river. So and it's very
Wow.
wide. Now they've dammed it up here and there. So who knows what it was really like back. But at flood stage, it's roaring and it's pretty wide. I mean, it's not like the Mississippi, but it could be 100 feet across it, and it's pretty deep in a lot of places. So,
So they could have sailed up that river, is what you're saying.
oh yeah, I would think so. And
Yeah.
maybe prehistoric times or ancient times, it might have been different. It
Well,
could have been,
and like I said, I think the water levels were higher.
yeah.
There's we have the Cumberland here in Nashville, and I've seen old pictures of Nashville back into I think it's 1910s. So, uh, around 100 years ago ish, and the river level is noticeably higher in these old pictures.
Really?
Because if you go downtown now and you go up to the river,
Hmm.
you look down and it's like a cliff. It's like the wall of a cliff. I mean, it's the river's way down there now. But in the pictures, the river flows right up to the streets.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I don't know, 20 feet? It
Hmm.
looks like it was about 20 feet higher. And I'm
Yeah.
ballparking that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm eyeballing it. But I think these river systems I think there was more water
Yeah.
coming
That
through
that
this
definitely
time.
changes over time and for a lot of reasons, for sure.
Hmm.
But I have a buddy of mine. He used to go down that Brazos River that closer to where these giant footprints are, closer to my area. And he said when he was young, he went canoeing up this river and he saw some like hieroglyphic writing on the cave on the wall, the cliff wall of the river. He said he can't remember where it was, but he saw it. And then he parked his canoe and went hiking and he saw a big balancing rock that had been balanced on something. And so I've always wanted to go find that. I haven't found that one, but it's right in this area. So who knows who these ancients were or what kind of, hieroglyphic writing they were using, but they were here.
They were here. I think that stuff was everywhere. I've got an account of this actually right here in one of my books. And this is speaking to these I think they were using balancing rocks, standing stones,
Mhm.
dolmens perhaps, and other just large stones as markers for something. And that's attested to in this book here. This is an old account. It says it's talking about Frankstown just beyond Huntington, making I'm trying to remember what this is in. I think Pennsylvania. Okay. So it says there was markers have been discovered, one standing near the old site of Frankstown and the other just beyond Huntington, marking the proper fork of the river at the confluence. Of course, Huntington stands today on a site which in Revolutionary War times was known as Standing Stone. Here at this spot, an ancient stone marker once towered on a promontory. Amazed explorers described the stone as an obelisk, 14 feet high, broad of the base, and tapering to 6 or 7 inches at the top, covered on all four sides with undecipherable letters, believed by some who first saw it to have been Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Hmm.
This stone has frequently been mentioned in Pennsylvania archives. The original disappeared around 1755, so this is gone. But this is only one of the great many recorded standing stones that earliest travelers and explorers found, marking the trail from the Atlantic to the Ohio by water. A trail of standing stone markers found as far west as Lancaster, Ohio, was found, and diaries of various early explorers through this then wild region testify to these standing stone markers, having been there before their own time. And then it lists off these explorers: David Zeisberger, Conrad Weiser, George Grogan, Heck Wilder, Gist, and Peter Kalm. They all testify to encountering these standing stones over here.
Man.
And I looked in this area on a map when I found this account, and I just to see where it was. And I think what was happening was, I think they'd go up the Susquehanna
Hmm.
and they'd get on the Juanita River, and there was another fork there that was marked by this obelisk.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
And it
fascinating.
tells you. Yeah, it tells
Yeah.
you it
14 feet.
it
It's a large
disappeared.
stone.
Yeah, that's huge, right? Obelisk with see it. You're like, I think these hieroglyphic, whatever they were, not saying that they were
Yeah.
necessarily Egyptian, but those were everywhere. Those
Yeah.
are everywhere.
Yeah. There were different types of hieroglyphic writings. And, I have a old book well, not old book. I have a book with old types of languages, and you can look. It had like Amorite. It had like just a few characters, and like they're all kind of similar, and they were like hieroglyphic looking.
Hmm.
And so, and I think whenever different types of people lived among, say Amorites moved in with this type of people, and they kind of intermingled this, their languages and hieroglyphics would change slightly. And so, I think that's what was going on with those hieroglyphs in America here.
Yeah. Well, he talks about this a lot in this book you brought up earlier, America BC. He's got whole diagrams in here of this is Ogham
Yeah,
of some sort,
right.
but
Yeah.
there's also other languages here that look more hieroglyphic. I don't know if I'll be able to find the page right now, but one of them talks about a tribe in the northeast, Micmac
Hmm.
tribe.
Okay.
And there's a part in this book, I'll see if I can find it, where he shows the Micmac language right next to Egyptian hieroglyphs, and that matches up.
Oh my.
So many of the characters,
Yeah. It's
it's
not
not
identical,
perfect.
right? But it's real
It's
close.
some of them are identical, but not the whole language.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's real close.
Yeah.
And let me see if he's got a chapter in here called the Egyptian presence. Yeah. I'm not gonna I don't think I'm gonna be able to find it right now. Oh, here it is. Yeah, here it is. Here's one of the pages. It's got the Micmac next to the ancient Egyptian. And
Oh
so you've
yes.
got let's see, Micmac here,
Yeah.
Egyptian here.
Yeah.
I think this one is more close too. So you got Micmac here, Egyptian here.
I mean, obviously, you're looking at the same root language
Yeah,
or the same language.
yeah.
Maybe, it's like English changes over time, but it's still English. But that even looks closer than how English is in relation to Old English,
Hmm.
with not Hebrew, excuse me, to the Egyptian.
Yeah, it's crazy. And there's more over on this other page too. It's got the Egyptian figures for the exalted one, for God. Looks like the Micmac symbol. Heaven looks like a Micmac symbol. The Egyptians' dwelling symbol. Their word for is, their word for anything at all. The word for he can create. It's very close to the Micmac. And so there's something to all this, right? There's
Yeah.
something to all this. And I mean, I just flipped through it again and I saw there's a page in here on the Libyans. There's all these different people groups. So, and
Yeah.
then the
And so you have to
symbols.
wonder who were these mound builders, right? And
Mm-hmm.
who were all these people? And a lot of times you get a strange hieroglyphic that are mentioned in these reports.
Yeah.
And it'll say,
Yeah.
well, we're not sure what type, but there was this one stone that has this writing on it. You were talking a lot about Pennsylvania, and I want to bring this one report up. This is from 1915, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Two petrified skeletons, one of a man of giant stature, and the other of a woman, much smaller, were found in a cavern blasted out of solid blue rock. In Man, I wish I could read that. In some sort of hillside by quarrymen. Anthony Tarzai sank his pick and felt something give. A crevice led into a cavern about 6 feet high and 15 feet square. Geologists who have examined the skeletons say they evidently belong to a prehistoric race. So, there's prehistoric age, excuse me. So you have a giant man and a smaller woman, in Pennsylvania, in some sort of a cavern or cave, I guess
Hmm.
buried in there. Um, so that's right in that area we've been talking about a lot.
Yeah. I think when you like to answer or to speculate on your question some about who were the mound builders,
Yeah.
I think Pennsylvania, Ohio that's a really great place to look if you're wanting to look more into the mound builders. They were there and they seem to be giants and they seem to have I think Phoenician ties.
Hmm.
Maybe not exclusively Phoenician, but
Yeah.
some Phoenician ties with the copper trade and all that.
Right.
And I found this other account here, and this is Ohio, not far from Pennsylvania here, but this is a an account called, and I'm not going to read this whole thing because it's huge, takes up pages, but it's called the Ohio Cave Burial of Mummy Giants.
Oh, sweet.
And it reminded me of the one you just read. This was trying to find the Cincinnati Commercial Newspaper in March 3rd, 1880. And it says about 1 mile from the pike is a level plateau of 200 odd acres surrounded on all sides by lofty hills. As you near the mouth of the cave, there is a gradual depression of the ground on every side, forming what in the local nomenclature is denominated as a sinkhole. So this goes on to say this is how they kind of got into this place. There were some cave openings, and then there were also sinkholes that had
Hmm.
happened because of this. There's this cavern underground, and part of it's starting to give. Right. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I think once you get into Ohio and St. Louis, you start to see these sinkholes associated with these for ancient areas or of settlement. Some of them were underground now. Like some of these cities are underground, and
Hmm.
the ground gives way to them. But anyway, this goes on to say that they get down in there, and it says suspended from the roof by delicate copper rods. See, they're using the copper directly over the head of the recumbent figure is a copper lamp of unique design, elegantly crafted. At each corner of the mausoleum rises a carved pyramidal column surrounded by caps that are unmistakable or unmistakably Doric. On two sides of the rooms are tombs. So I'm going to skip again a little bit ahead because
Wow.
this is just there's so much description. It's an underground tomb of some
Yeah.
sort, right? Uh,
Yeah.
one of the party cut the wrappings from the face. This is talking about the mummies now. It did so he cut the wrappings from the face, but did it so clumsily that the head crumbled into dust.
Ugh.
Portions of the hair remained sticking to the cloth. And this newspaper correspondent brought some of it away with him, and it's black, curly, and of a fine texture. So there were giants too, by the way. Besides the body of the giant, the tomb contained a spearhead, a hatchet, two lances, three mattocks, a spade, a cup, two plates, a small urn, all of copper. And it says, this is what I wanted to get to. These wonderful people understood the secret of hardening copper, for an ordinary file would barely scratch the lance, and the edge of the cold chisel turns up like lead when struck against it. So they knew how to alchemically harden copper to make it useful as tools. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
That is. Where was
Oh,
this again?
this
What?
is in
What?
Ohio.
Ohio. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, there's one more interesting thing here. They looked at the stalagmites and tried to get a date on it, right? So it
Oh.
says, in all probability, the room was dry when the wonderful people who designed and built it were alive. The stalactites and stalagmites have since formed. I measured one of the larger of the stalagmites. It was 5 feet 6.5 inches from base to apex. It would have been 3,325 years, reaching its present length. So he's ballparking it, of course, but it's
Right.
possible
Yeah.
that this is a tomb, a mausoleum underground with giants and mummies that's 3,000 years old in Ohio. And in the end of this, it says the owner is anxious to have a scientist examine the cave, and at his request, a description of the discoveries together with the engraved book. They've been forwarded to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. And that's how it ends. And I
Ah,
want to mention it mentions an engraved book. I didn't read
mhm.
that part, but
Yeah.
they also found a book down there. And
Really?
the pages were made of copper.
Oh my.
So they were really using that copper.
They were. Yeah, they did. And then, well, they got it all up from, Isle Royale up in Michigan. Yeah, that's all there's copper in all of these. Like I just found a report the other day of two of these mound builders. They thought they were kings or something like that. They had copper helmets. So yeah,
Yeah.
they were using it for all kinds of stuff. Oh man, so there was a book and it went to the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
I hope they didn't smelt it. I hope they kept it.
Yeah, that's where that article leaves off. That's where a lot of these articles leave off, is that the stuff gets sent off to the museum. There's actually one more here. This is one of yours that I found. I'm gonna pull it up here. See if this fits into. No, I think this was Montana. And I thought
Okay.
this one was interesting because it was another sort of a cave where they
Uh-huh.
found, let's see. So you've got, it's Montana. The Helena correspondent of the Pioneer Press sends this remarkable story, accompanied by numerous attestations of its truth, or to its truth. It was told by a gold hunter. He said that while prospecting in the Belt Mountains, he found a peculiar depression in the ground. After excavating, he discovered a mysterious cavern reached by 23 steps. At the foot of the stairs, he said, on one side of the passage lay the skeleton of a man of immense stature. The skeleton measures exactly 9 feet 6 inches in height. The skull lay a few inches from the trunk, and between the two lay 27 nuggets. They were strung on a fine gold wire and ranged from 1 ounce to 10 in weight. Around the thigh, arm, and skin bones were other strings of nuggets, none of which weighed more than 4 ounces. They were about 15 pieces of gold in the pile. And there's another second half to this. I'll pull it up. And again, this is one of yours, Travis. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for finding
Uh,
this one.
Thanks.
Uh, where do I start here? Well, did I screenshot the same? Let me see
Well,
here. They were strung on a fine gold. They were many different shapes. Here we go. Here we go.
did you find it? Okay.
I found my place. There were about 15 pieces of gold in the pile. They were of many different shapes. None of them weighed over 3 ounces. Each piece had a hole through the center. On each side of the skull, I found some sort of precious stones. Then lay in a tiny golden basket and were evidently worn in the ears as an ornament. Okay. This is, sorry guys, this one's getting a little blurry here. But
Hmm.
it says, I do not know what the name what name to give them, but I believe that they are rubies. Beside the trunk of the skeleton, I found a copper axe with an edge harder and keener than any steel instrument of the kind I've ever seen. On the opposite was a club made of the same metal as the axe. It was shaped not unlike a baseball bat, like a club, sounds like. Under the trunk was a gold plate 10 inches long, 6 inches wide, 1/8 of an inch thick. It was covered with strange devices. A little further on lay another skeleton, that of a woman. I picked up a string of gold nuggets near this skull also. And there's a third part, and I guess I don't have it, but if I remember correctly, it goes on to talk more about the rubies. There were like more rubies found with this.
Yeah, I think I might have. I don't know. I don't know when I posted that one, but
Well, I'll
that
tell
when
you
you
what.
mentioned that, I was like, okay, I know I found an article with like something with gold, and I just couldn't
Yeah.
remember what it was, and it's that one.
Yeah, yeah. And this, I'm glad I'm glad I thought to bring this up, man, because this touches on a lot of stuff we've been talking about. building up to this point in the conversation. I mean, you got it all here. You got the giants, the copper, all the tools. Like this guy's saying that there was an axe here that the edge was super sharp and hard. It's like these
Yeah.
people had these really, really well crafted tools, and they had rubies. They're wearing rubies in their ears, and they're wearing gold necklaces with nuggets of gold. Like this is crazy, man. This is 1889 from the New York Tribune, July 8th.
Hmm.
Gold and rubies in Montana. That one's epic. This
It
one's so
is.
epic.
Yeah. It's like, okay, there was a lot going on in the United
Yeah.
States way back then, like
Yeah.
prehistory, like, well, prehistoric times or whatever you want to call it, ancient times. Um, and they seemed, I don't want this to sound bad, but they weren't always just wearing, some of these people did wear feathers and stuff. I think they think all wore feathers, but like rubies and gold, like that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and like hardening copper in such a way. I'll just tell you this, I don't even know how to do that. Like I can't get out there and do that. I can't go and just mine the copper out and then create something like that.
Hmm.
I'd have to go to school. I'd have to go to some sort of a class, and like, who knows if those classes would even exist today,
That's what I was going to say. I'm assuming that modern man knows how to
right?
harden copper, but I'm not so sure about that.
You know what I mean? Like,
This might be
yeah,
a
that's
lost, forgotten art.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like there was a time that I did come across an article where there was like an old blacksmithing type situation going on, like similar to what a blacksmith would do, like where they were hardening things. Um,
Kenites, the Cain, or well, some people suggested they're the descendants of Cain, but there was a group in the Middle East called the Kenites, and
uh-huh,
they were related to the Canaanites. They were a
yeah,
faction of Canaanites, and their practices go back to their ancestor Tubal Cain.
right,
So
yeah,
again, this blacksmithing, metallurgy,
hmm,
alchemy of metals goes back to this group again, these
yeah.
Canaanites.
And they knew where to find it in the earth. They knew what it was when they saw it, and they knew what to do with it and how to
Yeah.
make, and who knows, like some sort of
Where did they get the
giant.
rubies?
I don't know.
You know, I don't do are
Yeah,
rubies do people find rubies in North America?
I don't know. Well, that's a great question because we could find out where the trade was coming from. Like, where
Yeah.
did rubies originate?
I mean, I know that they find them in India, and I'm
Yeah.
guessing other places in Asia. That's just off the top of my head.
Uh-huh.
Maybe they're in South America. Who knows? But I don't know. I've never heard them. And maybe there's some guy out there yelling right now, like, "Oh, they know how to harden copper. They know they where to find rubies now."
Ah,
But I
yeah.
just don't know.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. That's not what I study most of the time.
Right.
But if you want to figure out where these people came from, that'd be a way to maybe possibly trace them, or at least their trade routes were coming from somewhere like that.
Yeah, and were they well, they were giants because that's mentioned in articles, but were they the rulers over a broader group of people? Like we go back to that
Yeah.
story of uh the guy from Mobile, Alabama I was talking about, Tuscaloosa, Chief
Uh-huh.
Tuscaloosa. He
Right.
seemed to be
Right.
one of the only giants remaining there, but he was the ruler, and he was probably the ruler because that's an ancient tradition. That bloodline
Hmm.
traditionally were the priest kings that related
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
the Fallen or the Anunnaki or however you want to go. So
Yeah.
were these people in all these articles adorned with rubies and gold because they were the priest kings to this people? I got
Yeah.
another one too of yours I'm gonna bring up now that I'm thinking about it. This might fit in. Let's see. This was I found this one on your site, and I labeled it the Chillicothe Royals.
Okay.
And I think we've talked about Pennsylvania, we've talked about Ohio.
Yeah.
I think this general area is right on the money for some of the stuff we've talked about today, because in Ohio, I found in my research that's where they were building cities on top of cities. Like what's our buddy here, Roger G. Kennedy, who was ahead of the Smithsonian, said they built Cincinnati on an ancient city. Well, it wasn't just Cincinnati. I think they did it with Newark. We know Newark was an ancient city.
Yeah.
You know, the Newark earthworks.
Right.
They did it with, I think, with Columbus. There was certainly a mound site there. There were mounds in Youngstown, Ohio, right where the city is now, and Chillicothe is another one. I think they put the city right on top of an older settlement, and so I labeled this one Chillicothe Royals. This is September 10th or September 25th from 1925. The producer's news. Chillicothe, Ohio. Thousands of pearls, many of them of enormous size and exquisite color, were found near here today with the remains of 4 builders. I'm assuming that means mound builders. The
Hmm.
skeletons believed to be those of members of some of a long forgotten royal family among the mound builders. They were found in the end of the charnel house of what is known as Pricer Mound on the Seep Group at Bainbridge, Ohio. The find is expected to prove one of the most important ever made in the study of the mound builders. It says Graves of Ancient Kings. The curator Henry Shelton of the Ohio Archaeological Society. That's a weird way to ARFI.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
weird word. What is that? Anyway,
They get, yeah.
Ohio Historical Museum, in charge of the opening of the mound, named today's find at he named it the Burial of Pearl. So, and there's more to this article. I didn't say the whole thing, but
Yeah.
this caught my eye because it's Chillicothe. It's right there. It says they found it right there in town. It looks like at the end of a house called a charnel house.
Yeah.
So this was right in town, and they had all
Yeah.
these pearls.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. Like there's potentially treasures right
Yeah.
beneath our feet still in some of our major cities.
Yeah. These are the guys that had the copper helmets on the
Mhm.
skulls.
Right on.
Yeah. And what after they opened the grave, they had armed men to guard the grave because they didn't want any like grave robbers to come in and take away the finds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Man, pearls as large as hickory nuts. So yeah, that's wild, and that's right there where that ancient city would have
Mm-hmm.
been. So I would surmise, would be the builders or inhabitants of the ancient city.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah,
obviously.
and if you look at Cincinnati, George Washington and Henry Knox came along and they said that this would be a good location for us to settle, but it was already a settlement. And you can find that information online still if you look up the Fort Ancient People. They go
Oh
back
yes,
to,
yes,
I think, 700 AD. They're the people who were living in Cincinnati before George Washington and Henry Knox said, let's put a city here with this other settlement. And but the Fort Ancient People, you look into their legends, they say that the mound builders lived there before them and built earthworks and structures there. They said that they moved into an area that the mound builders had already inhabited. So who knows how old
yeah.
Cincinnati is? Like
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, who wouldn't, right? If you had if you came across a place that was already built up and had fortifications. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like the Israelites did the same thing when they took over the Canaanite areas. I mean, Jerusalem used to be called Jebus, which was a Jebusite city. So it would be much like that here in this situation. Like, why wouldn't you take over something like if it's not being inhabited or if they were driven out, you would just use what was there and
Right.
just build on top of it. And I think that's what we were seeing in some of these, what I would call the pre-cliff dwellers, out west. They're down below, right there, but just right underneath a little bit, some of their, burials. And maybe they did build those cities, but I feel like what you're saying too, and what we're seeing is like a lot of these places were just built up on top of, even to the modern day,
Mm-hmm.
even up to the modern day.
Yeah. A listener sent me something recently. I thought this was interesting. They reached out and they said that their ancestors were on the Mayflower. And this guy listens to the show, so he was including some details he thought that I'd be interested in, and I was. And so he mentioned that uh, they got off the Mayflower and they settled a city at the confluence of waterways,
Hmm.
right? And he said it's called Hartford. Most people
Okay.
probably heard of it, Hartford,
Yeah.
Connecticut.
Yeah.
And he said it would, but here's the thing: it was already a bustling city of natives when they went there. So, like you're
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they just go ahead and settle in a place that was already settled?
Yeah. It's already kind of cleared. It's
Mm-hmm.
already a great location, and
Mm-hmm.
it because of waterways, and where waterways join other waterways, and yeah,
That's the
that's
highway, like you said
it
earlier.
is.
That's
Yeah.
you put your why not put your city right out there on the big highway of the day, which would be the Ohio River or Susquehanna or what have you.
Yeah. Makes me want to get on a canoe and just traverse up some of these rivers and see what we can find. I mean, it's so overgrown, but like, what's there to be discovered, right? There's got to be a lot in our United States of America that needs to be rediscovered and brought back to light. I mean, even when I was in Pinson, Tennessee, at the Pinson Mound complex, looking at the Great Mound there, um, I found around that mound there was just it's in the trees, so you don't really see it, but there was an earthen bank all the way around it, just like they do in the British Isles. That hinge is what they call hinges. And I was like, okay, and I looked around for a plaque to mention anything about it, but there wasn't one. And, it was only like, 2 to 3 feet tall, but it was there nonetheless. And I was like, okay, that's fascinating because I remember reading, Fritz kind of made, he spoke about it like that's what they did in the British Isles, and he's seen that in the Ohio Valley. But I was in Tennessee and I saw one around that big mound.
Yeah.
And that was a high place mound, like a temple worship mound, that large one. It was like 70 to 72 feet above the ground, the ground level. But, I think it's fascinating that what can we find still? Like if we
Right.
just poke around, what is there to
Yeah.
be found?
And I've seen Fritz post some stuff like that about these hinges,
Hmm.
and he'll show you like the measurements, the
Right.
diameter, and oftentimes they'll the hinges will line up with the solstices,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and then they'll include all this advanced math as well.
Yeah.
Math that these people shouldn't have known, math
Well,
that is still advanced to us today,
yeah.
honestly, as a people.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
we're not most of us aren't using trigonometry out here
No.
on a
And
daily
I'm
basis.
thankful that like Fritz, that's what he's like. He's super good at. He spent, I forget how many years he spent like hiking basically, right? And he said he was doing it like in the wintertime to document it because that's when the mounds were like most visible was in the winter when there's no leaves on the trees and a bunch of, grass and stuff. But I feel like he did a lot of measuring. He measured a lot of these things himself. And, even that mountain I was just talking about that I saw that hinge around. The four corners of this, it's actually a pyramid. It's a flat top pyramid is what it is. But it's a mound because it has four, excuse me, it has four corners, and each corner faces north, south, east, and west.
And
So
is this at the site with giant footprints?
no, this mound that I'm talking about is in
Oh, Tennessee.
Pinson, Tennessee. And you
Yes.
could go there. It's an archaeological area. It's not really a state park. It's similar to a state park, but it's called Pinson Mound Archaeological Site or something like that. They have a little museum there that you can go in and see some of the artifacts, which I can't really remember what the artifacts look like. I need to visit it again. I plan to soon,
Yeah.
go back in there.
I've got the papers from the Peabody
Yeah.
about their excavation of Nashville.
Oh,
And
really?
I think it includes some of that area.
Okay.
that you're
Oh,
talking about.
yeah.
They came out here and did an excavation, and quietly, the Smithsonian had a guy out here accompanying them, and his name's John Wesley Powell.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
he started the Cosmos Club in 1878, which is where I think what they did there was an infrastructure was put in place that would swerve the narrative. According to swerve the narrative about everything ancient that was being found over here.
Yeah.
These guys didn't like the idea, apparently, of telling people about giants and these ancient sites and stuff like that. It's these a couple group of guys. It's a couple guys in the government in DC, basically.
Yeah.
But he was at. But anyway, that was John Wesley Powell. He was at the Pinson Mounds excavation here in the Nashville area, and he didn't document anything. So
Hmm.
that was I thought that was kind of lousy that he
Yeah.
didn't they came out here and they found all this crazy stuff. Like you can still I found pictures of some of the stuff they found out here.
Hmm.
Wild artifacts.
Yeah.
I mean, including something we mentioned earlier, those big stone graves, like
Uh-huh.
megalithic graves,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. All
Really?
these cool little, yeah, just cool little urns and all kinds of stuff. I've got pictures of it, and the Smithsonian didn't document any of that for whatever reason. But when it comes to artifacts, I've got one other thing we can pull up here in a minute. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
think I just went down a tangent there. But
No, that's no. When you said that, it's like what we need. We need a book that just has all this ancient stuff put together and just kind of build a story of who these people were based off their
Mhm.
artifacts and stuff that were buried with them.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because
like
the stories are forgotten, really.
they're forgotten, and also, yeah, I don't know what all happened there, but this is why I pulled this one up and picked this one to show today too, because this is also Chillicothe, but um, there's like I think there's a little clue in this one, right? So I'll read it. November 23rd, Warren K. Moorhead and Dr. Creason, who have been prospecting excavations here for the past 3 months in the interest of the World's Fair, have just made one of the richest finds of the century in the way of prehistoric remains. These gentlemen have confined their excavations to the Hopewell Farm 7 miles from here, upon which are located over 20 Indian mounds. A few days ago, they were at work on a mound 500 feet long, 200 feet wide, 28 feet in height, and near the center of the mound, they exhumed a massive skeleton of a man which was encased in copper armor. The head was covered by an oval shaped copper cap. Now, that's interesting. All that's interesting, but the clue here is that they were making these excavations for 3 months in the interest of the World's Fair.
Oh, yes.
So that ties the World's Fair into this stuff. That means,
Yeah.
and this is something I've picked up on and I've suspected for a while. I think
Hmm.
they did this in Nashville. They had the Centennial Exposition in the late 1800s here in Nashville. It was a World's Fair. I think what happened was a lot of these finds, man, got brought in and displayed at the World's Fair
Yeah.
and then essentially disappeared after that because they didn't go out to the museums, for what I could tell. I don't know I don't know if they went into private ownership, private
Hmm.
collections, but it seems like there was some degree of rounding up the artifacts, showing them at the World's Fairs, and then poof from there. Don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But it's a clue, right?
It is a clue. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that out because that reminds me of like one of the giant footprints that was found in the area where I'm near the area where I'm from. Uh, it was dug out and it was sold to a guy, and then it went to one of these world fairs, but no one knows where it went after that.
Really?
Yeah, that's interesting. But I think you're on to something there, and I'm glad you brought that up
Hmm.
about that because yeah, what did happen to them after that? I mean, some of them went to different museums, some of them went to the World Fair. the World's Fair. I've thought of this a while back. Are there any magazines or from the World's Fairs that they used to do, like with photos?
People are looking for all that kind of stuff because there's a lot of interest in those world fairs now because people are starting to pick up on how weird they are. Just overall,
Yeah,
like they built these extravagant buildings, huge
exactly.
buildings.
Huge,
The
crazy.
like the one in New Orleans, the World's
Hmm.
Fair down there, which I think was called the Cotton Expo. They built the largest building in the world for that, and
Just for that.
apparently just for that. And they say that people would go into this place, and it had like it was like genius in how they put it together. It'd be like a huge warehouse with these big, I don't know, big arching ceilings, and they don't know how they built them.
Yeah,
And it's like a huge warehouse in there, and I think they probably had displays set up, kind of like a just like a fair would. You could
yeah,
walk through and look at these crazy artifacts and stuff like that. But
yeah.
it's like, what did they do? And I've got pictures of the expo here in Tennessee. They had a pyramid out here for that. I don't know if it was here first. I don't know if it was here for the fair or what.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell. They had a radio tower up. In the one of the pictures, there's a radio tower. It's like, what were they doing with a radio tower back in the
Y-
1800s? So there's all
Yeah.
kinds of weird stuff with these world's fairs.
I was thinking about that a while back. It's like if we could get photos from that era, if they had if they took pictures at all and made any type of like flyers or magazines, you might find some weird looking artifacts, kind of like we're talking about here, documented. Because a lot of these newspapers, it's rare to have pictures. I don't know if it costs more or they just didn't have when the farmer was finding it and like when the curators and archaeologists went out there, they just didn't take any photos. I mean, some of these 1800s, early mid 1900s, it probably cost too much, or maybe they just didn't want to do that. I don't find a lot of photos there's rare photos of skeletons, and so it'd be nice to find more, photographic, not
Well,
evidence, but just photographic
for
documentation.
sure. Yeah. I think a lot of this stuff just went missing. I mean, that's just what I keep finding. It's speaking of photographs, there was a photograph that emerged of Serpent Mound and a giant they believe they found at Serpent Mound.
Yeah,
That was tucked away in some file, probably not meant to be found, and it resurfaced. But like some of the stuff we talked about today, all the
yeah,
really interesting artifacts went missing. You've got
yeah,
that obelisk
yeah,
from 1755 that I read. That was
yeah,
a marker between the rivers. I
yeah,
mean, that's missing. There was an obelisk said to be at Montauk Point in
yeah,
New York with like Hebrew on it. It's
yeah.
missing. We read a Grave Creek account earlier. There was the Grave Creek tablet that's missing.
Right.
So all the cool artifacts are missing. So
That's sad.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's sad. It's
It's
sad.
yeah.
But
And yeah.
we're doing what we can.
Yeah, that's right. That's we're doing all we can, really. And maybe we'll maybe we'll find some of our own stuff
Yeah,
eventually.
that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping people will come forward if they have stuff. A couple people who listen to the show have come forward with things already. A guy sent me some stuff from Etowah Mounds.
Yeah.
It's in that general area, and he's got all these crazy findings from Etowah down in Georgia.
Hmm.
One of them is a big old face. It's a big stone face. It's pretty
Oh,
cool.
wow.
That's something that was sent to me, and as a picture, right? And then
Yeah.
another guy found an old coin, an ancient coin, up near the
Wow.
Great Lakes, Indiana side, I believe.
Yeah.
So people, and that's just to name a few. I'm sure there's way more finds that people
Oh,
have.
yeah.
So if, we'll just have to, I
Eh,
encourage them to. I encourage people who have those finds to come forward to honestly come forward to podcasters because
yeah.
we're not going to destroy your evidence and tell you to get lost. Most of us are independent. We don't have a dog in the fight. If and
Yeah.
we want the stuff to we want the light to be shined on this
But
issue.
yeah, right. Bring it to light and report it. And yeah, it's like that stone or couple stones that I told you about that to me looks a whole lot like Ogham, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
that I came across. It's just written on old sandstone. Um,
man. I mean, you had a great find with some of this stuff. Some of the stuff you told me that you came across tonight,
mhm.
man.
Yeah.
What an area.
Yeah, I'm turning rocks over. I'm looking. I'm always looking. It's like, what rock am I going to turn over? And I find some sort of ancient scratched or hieroglyphic or some sort of writing. I'm looking. I'm looking
Yeah.
for it. So
Well,
maybe
next
one day I will.
Yeah, well, when you find it, let me know. We'll share it over
Yeah,
here. We'll share
yeah,
it
for
over here,
sure.
man. Yeah, do
Yeah.
you have anything else you wanted to share?
I mean, I think we hit a lot of
I
great points.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, we had the John Smith story, but I also had this report. It's from 1919, Pennsylvania. Archaeologists find skulls of prehistoric giants in the Susquehanna River Valley. Visiting sites of Indian villages, so like towns,
Mm-hmm.
maybe what
Mm-hmm.
is it, a city? I don't know. And digging up aborigines and other relics are said to have made the most astounding discovery on the Murray Farm in finding the bones of 68 prehistoric men.
Mm.
The average height of these men when their skeletons were assembled was 7 feet, while many were much larger. Additional evidence of their gigantic size is found in the massive stone battle axes in their graves. The average age of these men is said to have been from 30 to 40. Another amazing point of this discovery is the allegation that perfectly formed skulls were found from which horns grew straight out from the head. So I don't think all of them, some of them had some sort of like a bone tuberance type thing coming off the skull.
Hey,
But
I'm into it. I'm down. I think I mean I that's what I said about unicorns earlier.
yeah,
It's like to me, a horse with a horn is not that big of a stretch. I mean, cows have horns, other types of deer have
yeah,
horns. I think it's very likely that there was a species of horse that had them.
yeah.
And
It's
maybe
not,
it maybe happened in people too.
yeah, I don't know why some of these giants, that's not the first time I've come across some giants that had some horns.
Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy, but
and they're
I
not
can see
always the
it.
same length. They're not always in the same spot. And they're not always all of them, you know. And it makes you wonder, why did the Vikings, or not really Vikings, the lore has Vikings with horn helmets. It was more the Celts that had the horn helmets. So why did they wear horn helmets? And maybe some Vikings. And where did the tradition of the devil, we know with or Satan with his horns, did it come from some of these ancient titans that had sometimes maybe had horns, and they were scary because they were so big. Who knows? Who knows where that came from? But this was from the same region. You had men that were 7 feet, while many were much taller. From right there and finding them in these old Indian villages and digging them up.
Mhm.
So back in 1919.
Darth Maul from Star Wars with the little horns.
Yeah,
People
right.
walking around with these little protrusions. Yeah,
Yeah,
you said something there, and it got me thinking about one more thing here. I'll show you if I can find my place. You're talking about these Indian Native American settlements up along the rivers, right? And you said I
yeah,
don't know if you said I'm not sure if they were cities.
yeah.
Well, that's true. We don't know, but in the case of some of them, they were cities, I believe.
Uh-huh.
I think the Cherokee had houses, like stone houses, streets. That's a whole other episode. But I looked
Yeah.
into Tennessee and
That's
some of
amazing.
the old Chota the Tennessee capital of Chota, and
Yeah.
Tanasi, where they named Tennessee after. It was Tanasi.
Okay.
Some of these were Cherokee cities, little cities that had, but they had houses and
Uh-huh.
buildings and streets. They had two-story buildings at least as well in some of these places. And then there's an account here from DeSoto when he came up into Tennessee. And it says here DeSoto, so he finds himself at the juncture of the rivers in Loudoun County, Tennessee, and he circles around the very heart of Appalachia. Here, DeSoto found a most agreeable climate, lush with abundance of growing things like maize, fruits, nuts, and grazing land. Here, DeSoto camped at towns situated on islands in the middle of the Tennessee River, both above and below Chattanooga. He found town after town and province after province bearing names. Here he found tribe after tribe cultivating the land. There were buildings and temples decorated with intricate carvings inlaid with pearl. So there you go.
Yeah.
DeSoto, when he came over, was in Cherokee land, Cherokee territory, and saw temples and buildings and intricate carvings inlaid with pearl. That's
Wow.
That's the kind of history that I'm trying to dig up, man.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here. I'm here for this.
Well, what you're looking for is how do these people live and what did it look like in their daily lives?
Yeah.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of know who they were. We know kind of how big they were, but I mean, what an amazing account. I could just picture it. All these modern, almost modern looking is what when I say modern, I mean, what does a house or a building look like today? That's what I'm kind of picturing,
Mm-hmm.
in these temples and stuff. That's
Yeah,
fascinating.
and some of these tribes spoke recognizable languages to explorers who came over. Like there's several stories that some of the tribes over here could speak Welsh.
Yeah,
And I mean, it wasn't perfect Welsh, but Welsh speakers could understand what they were saying. It was close enough.
I remember that.
And then you've got Hebrew, a lot of Hebrew influence with some of these tribes as well. We talked about
Yeah,
the Egyptian stuff earlier,
yeah,
the Mi'kmaq Egyptian language. Um, so my theory here is that some of these Native Americans over here came from the Middle East,
right.
and they brought those ancient building techniques with them, the likes of which you see in ancient Yemen. There's towns in Yemen you can look at that they said were founded by the sons of Noah after the flood, and they've 2,000-3,000-year-old cities in Yemen where the Queen of Sheba was said to have visited, and they were building and still build and still have some of the buildings there, and they're like 3-4 stories. They're
Wow.
they look like modern buildings, but they've been
Mhm.
building them that way for thousands of years. I think some of
Yeah,
that made its way over here.
for
That's my
sure.
theory.
No, that's kind of what I think too. And I think they just they moved here, they taught the locals that they became the locals or whatever, and they intermingled with them, interbred with them,
Yeah.
all the above, right?
Yeah.
Or some of them stayed themselves and then they fought with other tribes of people. I think it's all of that for sure. Different
Mhm.
regions of America, different things.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
man. Yeah.
Man, this has been wild.
Yeah, it's been a good episode, man. We've given everybody
Man,
at least 2.5 hours here. I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. We've given people a lot to think about and chew on. It's been a
oh
good
man.
episode, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on and bringing some of your findings, letting me show some of your articles, man. I really
Man, I'm
appreciate
glad
it.
you did that because I mean, so much of that stuff, like I sit there and I read through it. Like I'll just read through it. But like you kind of forget, or like I miss what I did is I missed the World Fair thing that you saw, right? I think that's crazy. And so like there's some of these articles are just little short ones, but some of them have a lot of info in them.
Yeah.
And like where'd they take it? What were they doing? who do they contact?
Mhm.
And oh man, this has been, I've loved this. I've
Yeah.
loved going over the ancient city things, and I didn't know about the Allegheny, what'd you call that tribe?
Yeah.
Um,
Alajiwi.
yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know that about those guys. I haven't done a deep dive into them and like their ancient prehistoric cities that have been built upon, you
Hmm.
know,
It
with
was the
each,
it was the fortifications that Chief
yeah,
Rolling Thunder was talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
dude, I love that.
Yeah.
That's so well.
That's yeah, what he was saying like fits perfectly with the geography of Pittsburgh too, because you could go to Pittsburgh today and you've got the peninsula area where the downtown is, where they filmed Batman. Bane, remember Bane like takes over Gotham, but it's really Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So you can be in that part of downtown and you can get on one of the many bridges in Pittsburgh and cross over the river, and right there is Mount Washington. And you can go up to Mount Washington and kind of overlook the whole city. It's beautiful up there. And it's a neighborhood up there. It's a city up there in its own right,
Oh man.
part of the city. And I think that's what he was talking about. The chief was talking about. They like locations like that where they could put a fortification, probably with their headquarters for their royal people, like their,
Y-
I don't know,
Yeah.
royal houses or castles or whatever. They could
Right.
put those up on top of the hill, and then down below would be
Hmm.
the town where the normal people live, just like you see in cities all over the world, really, ancient
Exactly.
cities. I think
Right.
Pittsburgh's just a perfect location for that, and I think that's what he was talking about. And yeah, you
Yeah.
look back and it says that the Allegheny had a fortification right there where the river splits, right there where Pittsburgh is.
Right where that's at.
Yeah,
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, this has been great.
yeah,
I've
yeah.
loved this, and I feel like it's something that not a lot of people know.
Well, nobody's talking about it that I know of.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you coming on, man. Because I think about it now when I look at I see your posts,
Hmm.
and I'm always fascinated with the giant topic. But I just thought it'd be a cool idea to talk about what was the situation over here.
Yeah.
What were they building? What were they doing over here? Were they building cities? I think they
Yeah.
were, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I didn't ever look into really. So that I've loved this, and now I'm
Well,
going to
you've
be
got
like,
plenty of stuff. You got
I
plenty
do.
of stuff
Yeah.
that points to it.
Yeah. A lot of it actually, it says it,
Yeah.
I just been more focused on, okay, who was found in this city? Who was buried here? Yeah. No,
Yeah.
this is great. I love this. There's
There's
so
no
many
telling.
avenues.
So many avenues. Yeah, that's what I was about to say, man. There's no telling how many different angles we have to discover with this topic. But yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate you, Travis, man. As always, it's great talking to you, man.
Oh
Had
man.
a great time. Remind everybody where they can find your work.
Okay. Okay. So you can find it. It's giants_of_ancient America on Instagram. You can find it on Facebook. You can find me there on TikTok. If you just go to my Instagram, I have them all. You can see it right there in the bio. I have TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. So,
Cool.
and
Cool.
that's where
And
you can find all these articles of reports of ancient findings. So,
yeah. Awesome, man. Yeah, we appreciate you, man. We appreciate what you do. And I think this is what the next generation needs more of, is just a reminder of our true history. So, and I'll cap it off with that, and I'll have everybody listening, I'll have Travis's uh details and links in the description below. Please follow the show, everybody. That's all I ask. If you want to take it a step further, share the show. Share the show with your friends. If you want to go perhaps even further, join the Patreon. Because after all, I put up new episodes every week up there. So check that out. But at least follow the show. That's my point. It's been another wild ride. As always, break the mold, conquer the realm, and thanks for listening.